The world was not always ours. Long before our cities rose, before our stories gathered into myths and then into history, there existed another kind of human, one whose footsteps echoed across frozen valleys and wind-carved mountains. Their breath steamed beneath pale Ice Age suns, and their nights glowed with the soft, trembling light of fires that guarded them from the darkness. In those ancient days, Earth was wilder, harsher, and far more sacred than we can easily imagine now. It was a world that shaped minds not through comfort, but through endurance, reflection, and a profound intimacy with nature. It was a world built for Neanderthals. They were not shadows or mistakes in our lineage. They were a parallel humanity, one sculpted by the glaciers and the forests of Ice Age Europe. For thousands upon thousands of years, they walked across a continent of giants, mammoths, woolly rhinos, cave lions, dire wolves. And somehow, in this landscape of raw power and razor-thin survival, they carved out a life rich with meaning. If our species was born in wide savannas filled with opportunity, theirs was forged in ice, in silence, in the long patience required to outlast winter after winter. Their minds were shaped by stillness, by careful observation, by a deep understanding of the land they depended on. Yet what makes this story remarkable is not only their struggle to survive, but the clues they left behind that suggest something deeper stirred within them, something we have been taught to believe was uniquely our own. Emotion. Memory. Imagination. Perhaps even something close to what we call a soul. For as long as modern humans have been uncovering Neanderthal bones, we have struggled to understand the beings they once belonged to. Early scientists looked at their skulls and saw brutality. Their brow ridges seemed heavy, their build stocky, their appearance unlike the delicate symmetry we prized in ourselves. And so we created a myth, the Neanderthal as the mindless brute, the primitive creature who grunted through a short and violent life. But slowly, evidence began to whisper a different story. A healed bone showing long-term care for an injured elder. A buried child covered in flower pollen. A circle of broken stalagmites arranged deep within a dark cave where no light could reach. Tools shaped with patience and crafted with an understanding not just of stone, but of intention. These clues suggested that Neanderthals felt the weight of loss, the warmth of companionship, and the drive to create something beyond survival. Imagine them now, not as hulking figures dragging clubs, but as communities gathered around firelight. The flickering flames would have cast warm shadows across faces shaped much like ours, faces capable of laughter, tenderness, fear, contemplation. They likely told stories, perhaps not with the same structure or symbolism as ours, but with meaning all the same. They celebrated small victories. They mourned their dead. They observed the stars, the seasons, the migrations of animals. They carved tools not only for utility but for the quiet pride of mastering their craft. In their presence, the Ice Age world felt alive. The crunch of snow beneath their feet, the distant bellow of mammoths, the cold biting at their skin, all of it formed the backdrop to a humanity that evolved differently, but no less richly. Their cognition, shaped by slower development and intense environmental pressure, may have granted them a calm, focused intelligence. They did not rush. They did not scatter. They lived with intention, each movement tied to survival yet guided by something more profound. And as we begin this journey into their lives and minds, the central question emerges like a figure stepping out of the fog: what if we were never alone? What if another kind of human once walked beside us, not as a failed version of ourselves, but as an equal, a species with inner worlds as deep and mysterious as our own? For too long, their memory has been reduced to stereotypes: cavemen, savages, primitive bodies with empty minds. But the truth is far more unsettling and far more beautiful. Their world was filled with creativity. Their hands shaped stone with artistry. Their social bonds displayed empathy and care. They may have had rituals, symbols, and perhaps even proto-beliefs about death and the unknown. Picture a small group gathering at dusk as the sky turns the color of ash and fading fire. Imagine parents teaching children how to fit a spear point to a wooden shaft, how to read the wind, how to move silently through snow. Imagine elders telling stories of the past, of hunts, of travels, of ancestors. Imagine moments of quiet reflection when one would stare out over a frozen lake and wonder what lay beyond the next ridge. These moments, though lost to time, are not beyond imagination. They are written in the hints left in their bones, in their shelters, in their tools, in the traces of pigment clinging to cave walls. They are written, too, in the DNA many of us still carry, a biological memory that tells us we once shared the world with other minds, other hearts. The snow that fell upon their final generations has long since melted, but the silence it left behind speaks loudly. It asks us to reconsider what it means to be human. To ask not only how Neanderthals survived, but how they felt, how they dreamed, how they understood their place in the world. It asks us to listen to a story that has waited for tens of thousands of years to be told with honesty and wonder. This documentary is that journey, a step back into a forgotten world, illuminated not by stereotypes but by science, empathy, and imagination. A world where the lost human species with a soul once breathed, once built, once loved. And though the ice has buried their footsteps, the echo of their existence still lingers, waiting for us to find it. Here, in this opening chapter, we take our first step into their world. And the snow begins to stir again. In the beginning, there was cold, a cold so deep, so endless, that it shaped not only the land but the very creatures who dared to survive within it. From this frozen cradle emerged a kind of human unlike any other. They were born into a world where the wind carved mountains, where seasons shifted with brutal force, and where survival demanded not only strength, but a mind honed by patience and perception. This was the birthplace of the Neanderthal mind, a mind sculpted by ice, sharpened by silence, and refined through millennia of adaptation. Where our Homo sapiens ancestors evolved on open African savannas filled with warmth, light, and abundant diversity, Neanderthals took shape under an entirely different sky. Their world was one of constraints, narrow valleys, towering glaciers, dense forests, and long stretches of frozen earth. In such an environment, impulsive thinking was deadly. Errors were not lessons, they were endings. To live here required caution, memory, and the ability to read the world with extraordinary sensitivity. Every subtle sound in the woods, every faint shift in light, every crack in the ice carried meaning. And so their brains became tuned to detail, to close-range perception, to deep awareness of the immediate world around them. Their skulls, larger in volume than our own, held a brain shaped differently, not better, not worse, but specialized. While Homo sapiens developed neural pathways that favored symbolic thought, rapid learning, and long-distance planning, Neanderthals cultivated a slower, more deliberate style of intelligence. What they lacked in speed, they compensated for in precision. Their spatial reasoning was profound, their memory centers robust. Theirs was a mind that could track animal migrations over years, recall sheltered valleys where winds softened, and navigate dense landscapes with near-infallible clarity. Imagine a young Neanderthal growing up under the shadow of ice. From infancy, the world teaches them through experience, the sting of frost, the warmth of a flame, the rhythm of footsteps in snow. Lessons are not told, they are lived. A child learns to observe before acting, to listen before moving, to study the land before venturing into it. In their world, every decision is carved by the environment itself, sharpening their minds into instruments of survival. Natural selection favored those who could endure the slow cycles of harsh climates, years of abundance followed by years of scarcity. These shifting patterns demanded long-term memory and adaptability. But adaptability, for Neanderthals, did not mean rapid innovation. Instead, it meant refining what already worked, perfecting tools, deepening knowledge, maintaining ways of life proven across thousands of winters. Stability, not novelty, was their strength. Yet this does not mean they lacked creativity or imagination. In many ways, their creativity was woven into their mastery of the familiar. While sapiens often reinvented tools with each generation, Neanderthals crafted theirs with a perfection born of continuity. A hand axe was not simply made, it was understood, every angle, every flake, every sharp edge shaped with purpose. To create something well was to survive. And to survive was the ultimate expression of intelligence. The cold also shaped their bodies, which in turn shaped their minds. Their powerful muscles, broad chests, and compact limbs required a brain deeply attuned to physical tasks. They could sense the texture of stone through their fingertips with remarkable precision. They could anticipate the movement of prey by watching tiny details, a twitch of fur, a shift in weight, the cadence of breath. Their cognition was embodied, a seamless blend of mind and muscle that allowed them to move through hostile terrain with quiet confidence. Language, too, was molded by the environment. Though likely different from our own, Neanderthal communication had to function across short distances, often in dense forests or echoing caves. Their voices may have been deeper, their speech patterns slower, yet full of nuance shaped by shared experience. A gesture, a grunt, a pointed glance, these could carry meaning built from years of living close together. Social bonds tightened by survival demands gave rise to minds capable of empathy, cooperation, and emotional depth. Over hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthal intelligence evolved not as a mirror of ours, but as a complement to it. While our species stretched outward, spreading across continents with explosive curiosity, they delved inward, mastering the landscapes they inhabited with generational knowledge. Their minds did not need to imagine distant worlds, their survival depended on understanding the world immediately before them. Their intelligence was not one of abstraction, but of presence. Still, within this deep presence lay potential for symbolic thought. The very fact that Neanderthals shaped pigments, engraved stones, and arranged structures in dark caves hints at minds reaching beyond the tangible. They may not have painted in sweeping colors like sapiens would later do, but their creations carried intention. They sensed patterns. They recognized significance. They understood that some places were different, sacred, mysterious, worthy of quiet awe. So when we picture the birth of the Neanderthal mind, we must imagine more than evolution's mechanical gears. We must imagine a consciousness awakening in a world ruled by ice, a world that required a soul forged from resilience and shaped by the rhythm of nature itself. A mind that learned to survive by listening to the land. A mind that discovered meaning not through excess, but through necessity. A mind that grew not in the sunlight of abundance, but in the shadow of glaciers. As the ice expanded and receded, as forests rose and fell, the Neanderthal mind evolved alongside the earth itself. It became a reflection of the cold world it inhabited, calm, patient, observant, steady. And though time has buried their footprints beneath layers of frost and soil, the traces of their intelligence still linger in the archaeological record, waiting for us to see them clearly. This was the birth of a mind unlike any other. A mind shaped not by the warmth that nourished us, but by the cold that tested them. A mind that endured. A mind that dreamed in silence. A mind that we are only now beginning to understand. To understand the emotional world of Neanderthals, imagine the glow of a fire flickering inside a stone shelter as night settles across an ice age valley. The cold presses in from all sides, but within this small circle of warmth, a group of individuals sits close together, sharing heat, food, and something far more ancient than language, connection. Their faces, illuminated by shifting amber light, reveal expressions we would immediately recognize: concern, affection, curiosity, fatigue, joy. In these quiet moments, the myth of the Neanderthal brute dissolves. What remains is a community bound by emotion as powerful and complex as our own. For decades, scientists underestimated their emotional depth, assuming that a species so rugged, so physically formidable, must have lived in purely instinctual ways. But evidence from excavation sites shows the opposite. Healed injuries indicate long-term care, broken bones that mended only because group members devoted weeks or months to supporting the injured. This was not mere survival logic, it was compassion in action. Neanderthals did not abandon their weak. They protected them. They adapted their movements, slowed their pace, and shared resources so that no one was left behind. In this simple truth lies a profound revelation: these ancient humans experienced empathy. Imagine an elder, scarred by decades of cold winters and dangerous hunts, now too frail to contribute. A child by their side places a hand on their shoulder, imitating a gesture they have seen their parents use in moments of comfort. A mother wraps an arm around her child after a fall, murmuring reassurance. These gestures, though unrecorded, were likely part of daily life, acts that require not only instinct but emotional understanding. Their social groups were small, tight-knit, and built on trust. Every day depended on cooperation, and cooperation was nurtured by bonds that extended beyond biological ties. A sense of belonging, of mutual responsibility, would have been essential. Their lives were hard, but within their communities, a complex emotional landscape flourished. Grief, too, was part of their story. Burials suggest intentional placement of bodies, sometimes accompanied by objects or pollen from flowers. While debates continue about whether this indicates symbolic thought, the emotional core is unmistakable. Someone cared enough to lay the body gently. Someone paused the relentless rhythm of survival to acknowledge loss. In the middle of a world ruled by cold and danger, they made space for mourning. Picture a group gathered around the resting place of a fallen member. The wind carries quiet snow across the ground as individuals stand in stillness. There are no words, but silence itself becomes a language, an expression of sorrow shared across the group. This moment, suspended in time, reveals a species capable of profound emotional depth. Laughter also had a place among them. Though we can never hear their voices, we know they possessed the anatomical structures for vocal expression. Their communication may have been richer in tone, gesture, and rhythm than we imagine. It is easy to picture young Neanderthals playing near the fire, teasing each other, stumbling in exaggerated movements that spark laughter among adults. Humor thrives where social bonds thrive, and within their small communities, moments of amusement would have offered relief from the constant vigilance required by their environment. Their emotional lives extended into the rhythms of daily cooperation. Hunting required coordinated effort, silent cues, shared trust. Gathering plant materials, processing hides, crafting tools, these tasks were often done with others nearby, creating opportunities for interaction. A parent guiding a child's hands over a piece of stone, showing them where to strike, two hunters exchanging glances before approaching prey, a group sharing a rare feast after a successful kill. These moments, stitched together, form a tapestry of emotional existence. Fear was a constant presence too, but not the chaotic fear of the unknown. It was the rational fear of predators, storms, and starvation, a fear that tightened bonds rather than fraying them. In moments of danger, individuals relied deeply on one another. The safety of the group was the safety of the self. Through fear, they found unity. Love, though impossible to measure directly, must have woven through their lives. Love in the form of shared burdens, in the nurturing of infants through harsh winters, in the protection of vulnerable members. Love in the form of loyalty, companionship, and the desire to preserve one another. Their world offered little margin for selfishness. To care was to survive. At night, when the day's dangers faded into the distance, there would be time for stories, not necessarily spoken the way we know them, but conveyed through gestures, reenactments, facial expressions, and rhythmic sounds. These firelight conversations were not merely practical, they were emotional exchanges that anchored group identity. The telling of a successful hunt, the miming of a humorous moment, the remembrance of a loved one who had passed, these were acts that reinforced shared memory and meaning. Their faces, reconstructed from fossils, reveal subtlety, softened cheeks, expressive eyes, strong brows capable of lifting or narrowing with feeling. They were not expressionless beings. Their emotions lived in every movement of their features, just as ours do. The image of a Neanderthal placing a hand on a companion's shoulder, sharing a piece of meat, or leaning close to warm a shivering child is not fantasy, it is a reconstruction grounded in archaeological truth. Their emotional capacities were not limited, they were fully human in the ways that matter most. If anything, their emotions may have run deeper. The harshness of their environment demanded reliance on one another to an extent modern humans rarely experience. Their bonds were not diluted by large populations or complex societies. They were immediate, essential, and profound. Firelight revealed their faces, but it also revealed their souls, souls shaped by resilience, tenderness, and the quiet strength of togetherness. And in those ancient circles of warmth and shadow, another kind of humanity thrived, one whose emotional world challenges everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human. To understand Neanderthals, one must begin with their hands. Thick-boned, powerful, shaped by a lifetime of gripping stone, wood, and hide, these were not merely tools of survival, they were instruments of creation. Each scar, each thickened joint, each callus told a story of craftsmanship that spanned generations. While our species often experimented rapidly and abandoned old designs, Neanderthals perfected theirs over thousands of years, turning every flake of stone and every shaped spear into a testament of deliberate mastery. Picture a Neanderthal crouched beside a fire, a rough block of flint held firmly in one hand. With the other, he wields a hammerstone, striking with slow, rhythmic precision. Each blow is calculated. Each angle considered. The stone resists, but he knows its weaknesses intimately, knowledge passed to him through years of observation and practice. Fragment by fragment, the shape emerges, a sharp-edged scraper, a finely crafted point, a blade that will cut through hide with ease. This process is meditative, almost ritualistic. It is not improvisation, it is art built on memory. Their tools reflect minds that valued consistency, strength, and durability. The classic Mousterian tool set, hand axes, scrapers, denticulates, was not static out of ignorance. It was stable because it worked. It was adapted to a lifestyle of close-range hunting, heavy physical labor, and life in rugged landscapes. These tools, designed to withstand repeated use, reveal a cognitive world focused on refinement over innovation. Neanderthals did not need constant change. They needed mastery. Their craftsmanship extended beyond stone. Though wood rarely survives the passage of millennia, the rare finds that remain, such as the ancient wooden spear discovered at Skåningen, show astonishing skill. Balanced, hardened by fire, and shaped with precision, it suggests an understanding of aerodynamics and durability. Wooden digging sticks, spear shafts, and structural supports were likely as common as stone blades. To shape wood requires finesse and an intimate familiarity with natural materials, qualities Neanderthal hands clearly possessed. In caves and natural shelters, traces of their building abilities appear in subtle but impressive forms. At sites like La Pharisee and Abric Romani, we see signs of spatial planning, stone pavements arranged for comfort, hearths placed strategically for warmth and smoke ventilation, activity areas organized with purpose. These structures are the fingerprints of minds that understood space, not just as a necessity, but as a canvas. Most astonishing are the Bruniquel cave structures in France, where Neanderthals assembled rings of broken stalagmites deep in the pitch-black interior. This was not simple construction, it required coordination, planning, and shared intention. Over 400 stalagmite fragments, some weighing dozens of pounds, were arranged in geometric patterns, their surfaces charred by firelight long extinguished. To build such a structure required not only physical strength but architectural vision. The darkness of the cave, the absolute silence, the weight of the earth above, suggests that this was no ordinary gathering. These were the first human architects stepping into a realm of symbolic or ritual significance, long before our species painted its earliest cave art. Their hands also manipulated pigments. Traces of ochre, manganese dioxide, and engraved stones indicate an understanding of color, texture, and surface. These were not random smears left by accident. They were choices, deliberate and thoughtful. A red-stained stone tool, a carved line on a piece of bone, a perforated shell likely used as an ornament. These small details reveal a species capable of aesthetic judgment. Imagine a Neanderthal carefully grinding pigment on a flat stone, adding a few drops of water or fat to create a paste. He applies it to the body of a companion, perhaps for protection, perhaps for identity, perhaps for reasons we cannot decipher. Such acts require a mind attuned not only to utility but to meaning. A mind that expresses itself through materials shaped by the environment. The strength of their hands shaped their daily lives. To butcher a mammoth required coordination, gripping stone blades with immense force, carving through thick hide and muscle, dividing meat for the group. To craft clothing from animal skins, they scraped hides clean with precision tools, softened them through repeated work, and perhaps stitched them using bone awls and sinew. Their hands were extensions of their minds, patient, steady, and profoundly capable. Even in play, their hands mattered. A child picking up a stone and copying their parents' movements. A teenager practicing flint-knapping techniques, guided by an elder's steady hand. Craftsmanship was not just survival, it was cultural inheritance. Through hands, knowledge traveled from one generation to the next. When modern humans eventually encountered Neanderthals, they would have noticed this. They would have seen the strength, the control, the expertise in every tool, every piece of crafted wood, every mark on the landscape. They might have recognized the Neanderthal's ability to shape the environment with calm, grounded confidence, a kind of intelligence that expressed itself not through rapid innovation, but through meticulous artistry. These hands built shelters, crafted weapons, shaped worlds. They arranged stones in circles deep underground. They traced meaning into the bones of animals. They held children close. They closed the eyes of the dead. They gripped tools that were not only useful but beautiful in their precision. To call them the great architects is not poetic exaggeration. It is a reflection of truth hidden beneath stereotypes. They were architects of stone, wood, light, darkness, and meaning. Their hands speak across time, telling us that intelligence is not measured only by how fast a species innovates, but by how deeply it understands the materials of its world. In every crafted tool and every arranged stone lies the imprint of a mind that shaped the Ice Age world with purpose. Their architecture was not made of towering monuments or grand designs, but of enduring mastery, one flake of stone at a time. And through their hands, we unlock a window into who they truly were, creators, builders, dreamers, human beings who left their mark not in written words, but in the silent architecture of survival. To step into the caves Neanderthals once entered is to cross the threshold between the known world and something older, deeper, almost otherworldly. The air grows colder. Light fades. The sound of your own breath begins to echo off stone walls shaped by time. For modern humans, these depths feel alien and unsettling. But for Neanderthals, they were places of intention, spaces they chose not for shelter or safety, but for meaning. These were the first human temples, sanctuaries of darkness carved by nature but claimed by a different kind of mind. The Bruniquel cave in France stands as one of the most profound pieces of evidence for this. Nearly 336,000 years after Neanderthals arranged fragments of stalagmites deep within its chambers, archaeologists found rings of broken stone columns deliberately placed in geometric formations. The structures were carefully built, some fragments stacked, others supported with pieces of burnt bone. And around them, traces of fire, charcoal, blackened surfaces, revealed that Neanderthals had illuminated this darkness with controlled flames. These were not convenient places. They were not near cave entrances. To reach them required crawling through narrow passages, carrying torches, navigating total blackness. Every step inward was a choice. Every moment of construction required cooperation, shared intention, and a vision of something that extended beyond immediate survival. In the silence of these caves, one thought echoes: Neanderthals were drawn to the dark. Why enter a place so dangerous, so inhospitable, so devoid of practical value? The answer may lie in the emotional and cognitive worlds hinted at by their archaeological remains. Deep caves evoke awe. They distort sound, amplify silence, and draw the mind inward. The flicker of firelight against limestone walls creates shifting shadows that could resemble spirits, animals, or ancestors. For a species so intimately connected to nature, this environment may have been sacred, a place where the boundary between the physical and the mysterious blurred. Imagine a small group of Neanderthals entering the cave together, their torches held high. Flames crackle, casting orange light along ceilings that drip with ancient water. Their footsteps crunch softly on calcareous ground. The deeper they go, the more the outside world disappears. Eventually, they reach a chamber where torches illuminate a ring of stalagmites, shapes broken from their original positions and carefully arranged. This circular design suggests intention, symmetry, and possibly ritual significance. To build such a structure required planning, teamwork, and a shared understanding of purpose. Here, in this absolute darkness, a kind of meeting unfolds, a gathering without written words, without symbols as we know them, but filled with meaning nonetheless. Perhaps they shared stories, miming the movements of animals. Perhaps they marked moments of transition, the birth of a child, the death of a loved one, the yearly migration of prey. Perhaps they simply sat together, experiencing the awe that arises when human minds confront nature's vastness. The cave was not only a place for ritual, it was a canvas for early symbolism. Scratched markings, pigment traces, and handprints appear in some Neanderthal-associated caves. Though less elaborate than the artwork of Homo sapiens who followed, these expressions testify to a growing awareness of identity and memory. To leave a mark on stone is to say, I am here. I existed. I mattered. In the sterile silence of a cave, such marks become acts of defiance against the oblivion of time. The absence of sunlight may have heightened the importance of fire, a symbol of life, warmth, and agency in a cold world. The way Neanderthals controlled fire, fed it, used it to shape shadows on walls, suggests a fascination with its transformative power. Firelight creates movement where there is none. It animates stone. In these subterranean chambers, fire may have been more than a tool, it may have been a companion, a symbol, a guide. In some caves, red ochre and manganese dioxide have been found, substances Neanderthals collected deliberately. Whether used for body decoration, object marking, or cave rituals, these pigments reflect a desire to enhance, to emphasize, to communicate something beyond the surface. They understood color not only as a material, but as a statement. Now imagine a group standing in front of a stalagmite structure deep underground. The torchlight flickers, casting ring-shaped shadows that dance across the walls. The air smells of smoke and damp stone. A low hum rises from one individual, a rhythmic vibration that echoes through the chamber. Others join, creating a resonance that blends with the natural acoustics of the cave. Their voices rise, fall, and merge with the darkness itself. These vibrations might have felt spiritual, transcendent, an early form of collective ritual. Outside, ice winds scour the landscape. But here, in this hidden chamber, community thrives. The cave is a womb of stone, sheltering a moment of shared humanity. It is easy to imagine that these gatherings strengthen group identity. In the face of a brutal world, spaces like these may have offered comfort, reflection, and a sense of connection to something larger than themselves. Some archaeologists propose that these deep cave gatherings were symbolic acts tied to memory, ancestor reverence, or even proto-spirituality. While we cannot know their exact meaning, one thing is certain: Neanderthals understood the power of place. They recognized that some locations held emotional or psychological weight. And they chose to return to those places again and again. Their relationship with darkness reveals a mind seeking more than survival. A mind curious about what lay beyond the visible world. A mind capable of perceiving mystery. These caves were not empty spaces. They were sanctuaries of emotion. Temples carved by nature but consecrated by human presence. The circles, the pigments, the burns, the gestures, they all speak of a species reaching towards meaning. The sacred darkness tells us something profound. Neanderthals did not fear the unknown. They stepped into it willingly. They shaped it with their hands. They lit it with fire. And in doing so, they transformed the deep earth into a place where their souls could speak. In these underground chambers, the line between survival and symbolism blurs, revealing a humanity richer and more enigmatic than the stereotypes ever allowed. The first temples did not rise under open skies, they grew in the depths of ancient caves, illuminated by flames held by Neanderthal hands. If we could travel back in time and stand beside a group of Neanderthals, the first thing that would strike us is the sound of their voices. Not grunts, not animalistic noises, but human voices, deep, resonant, and layered with meaning we may never fully decipher. Their conversations, carried through cold forest air or echoing softly within stone shelters, were part of a world where communication shaped survival, emotion, and identity. And yet, their language remains one of the greatest mysteries of prehistory. The anatomy of Neanderthals tells us they were fully capable of speech. Their hyoid bone, crucial for vocal control, resembles ours. Their vocal tract, though slightly different in shape, could produce a wide range of sounds. Their brains contained regions associated with language comprehension and production. Even their ear structure suggests they were tuned to human-like speech frequencies. In other words, they lived in a world where meaning flowed not only through gesture and expression, but through sound. Imagine their voices, lower on average than ours due to their large chest cavities and robust necks, perhaps with richer bass tones. A Neanderthal calling across a snowy slope might produce a sound that traveled far, steady, strong, unmistakably human. Within a close-knit group, their communication may have included subtle shifts in pitch, tone, and rhythm, each carrying information understood only by those who shared their daily struggles and triumphs. Their language, whatever form it took, was shaped by their environment. Dense forests and rocky landscapes favor short-range, precise communication. A soft whistle, a low hum, a firm click of the tongue could convey intention without attracting predators. Their words may have been fewer in variety than ours, but deeply meaningful, grounded in immediate experience. Where Homo sapiens developed abstractions, metaphors, and symbolic layers, Neanderthals may have mastered nuance, tone, timing, and context. Yet communication isn't just about the mechanics of speech. It is a window into thought. Picture a Neanderthal mother speaking softly to her child, teaching them how to shape a stone or identify an edible plant. Her tone carries comfort, authority, and affection. The child listens, repeating sounds, learning the rhythm of their people. These lessons of sound and gesture become foundations of culture, passed across generations like the tools they crafted. Their conversations near the fire might have included plans for the next day's hunt, warnings about predators, or shared memories of past journeys. Some exchanges were practical: how to butcher an animal, when to migrate, where the herd had last been seen. But others, undoubtedly, were emotional. A comforting murmur to soothe the injured. A celebratory shout after success. A quiet, trembling sound in moments of grief. Through these interactions, they built not only survival strategies, but social unity. Their faces were expressive, their brows capable of subtle movement. A slight tilt of the head or narrowing of the eyes could alter meaning as powerfully as any spoken word. Visual communication paired with vocal nuance created a multilayered language woven from body, breath, and sound. There were rhythms to their conversations, pauses shaped by caution, by contemplation, by the weight of a harsh world. They did not waste energy on meaningless chatter. Their speech may have been slower, more deliberate. Each word mattered. Each gesture reinforced it. And deep within caves, where sound behaved strangely, their voices would have taken on a different quality. The echoes, the vibrations, the way a single note carried through chambers filled with silence, this experience may have held spiritual significance. A hum, a chant, a rhythmic beat of hands against stone could become ritualistic, binding individuals in shared emotion. Their voices, amplified by stone and shadow, could transform darkness into something alive. Scientific clues also reveal symbolic thinking, the precursor to complex language. Pigment use, engravings, tools requiring multi-step planning, all point to neural networks capable of structured communication. They may have named places, tools, people, or seasons. They may have had vocal signals for danger, opportunity, or celebration. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of their communication was the emotional tone beneath it. Consider a group preparing for a hunt. A leader gives a short, quiet signal, barely a whisper, yet heavy with authority. Members nod, adjust their tools, and move silently through tall grass. Or imagine a moment after a successful kill, when voices break into relieved murmurs, laughter, shared satisfaction. Communication here isn't merely spoken, it is felt. Even conflict would have its own soundscape. Raised voices, sharp gestures, tense breathing. But perhaps, as in many small hunter-gatherer groups, disagreements were often resolved through calm negotiation. Survival demanded cooperation, not chaos. Their language evolved not in isolation but through necessity. To teach, to plan, to warn, to comfort, these required a system of communication beyond instinct. And in every surviving clue, we find evidence of minds capable of shaping such a system. This raises a deeper question: what truths about the Neanderthal mind are hidden in the sounds we will never hear? Maybe their language carried a different rhythm, shaped by the pacing of their thoughts. Maybe their words connected more directly to sensory experiences, texture, temperature, sound, rather than abstract ideas. Maybe their conversations were intertwined with silence, not broken by it. Silence, after all, was a constant in their world. It sharpened their awareness and gave weight to the moments when they chose to speak. In many ways, Neanderthal voices echo faintly through us today. Genetic evidence suggests interbreeding between their kind and ours. Some traits, emotional sensitivity, vivid sensory perception, deep focus cognition, may reflect the remnants of a Neanderthal communication style embedded in our neurological architecture. We try to reconstruct their speech from bone fragments and cave acoustics, but what we pursue is not just sound. We seek connection. We want to hear the voices of those who walked before us, who shared our world, who loved and feared and hoped as we do. And though the wind has long since carried their voices into silence, their presence remains. In the caves they lit. In the tools they shaped. In the marks they left on our DNA. Their voices, though lost, still whisper through the ages, reminding us that the first languages of humanity were born not in crowded settlements, but in the quiet, snow-covered valleys where Neanderthals spoke to one another beneath a vast ancient sky. Across the frozen landscapes where Neanderthals once lived, the clues they left behind are so subtle, so fragile, that following them feels like chasing ghosts. Their world has vanished beneath layers of soil, ice, and time, leaving only faint impressions, a footprint hardened in ancient mud, a scatter of bones near a long-dead hearth, a stone tool buried under centuries of dust. Yet from these fragments, we reconstruct their movements, their habits, and even their thoughts. Each discovery is like a whisper from the past, guiding us through the silent trails of a people who walked this earth long before our histories began. Imagine standing in a wide, open valley dusted with snow. The wind cuts across the plain, and the only sound is the soft hiss of ice drifting across the ground. Somewhere beneath your feet, thousands of years ago, a group of Neanderthals once passed this way. Their footprints, pressed into the earth, may have followed the tracks of reindeer or mammoth. They may have skirted the edges of a frozen river, scanning the horizon for predators. And though the prints have faded, the pattern of their lives remains etched into the land. One of the most haunting discoveries comes from Laetoli-like sites in Europe, where ancient footprints, those of adults and children, still trace the paths Neanderthals walked together. Some tracks reveal a child stumbling in soft sediment, an adult reaching out to steady them. Others show a coordinated group moving quickly, perhaps tracking prey or migrating to a new shelter. These trails reveal not only movement, but relationship. They show families moving as one, guided by shared purpose. Hearths, too, tell stories of their shifting lives. At sites like Abric-Romani, layers of ash paint a portrait of repeated use. Each hearth marks a moment of warmth carved out of the cold, a place where food was cooked, tools repaired, stories shared. The distribution of stone flakes around these hearths shows where individuals sat, how they organized their work, which tasks were performed together and which were done alone. In these circles of firelight, the rhythm of Neanderthal life comes alive. Bones scattered across ancient hunting sites reveal the precision of their strategies. Marks etched into the bones of deer and bison show the exact order in which Neanderthals butchered their kills, first removing hide, then extracting organs, then dividing muscle in ways optimized for carrying and sharing. Even the placement of bones within a site offers clues. A pile of ribs may indicate a communal feast, a carefully cleaned femur might suggest preparation for tool use, broken marrow bones reveal nutritional knowledge passed down through generations. We also find traces of their seasonal migrations. Through pollen samples, animal remains, and fire patterns, scientists map the shifting paths Neanderthals took as the climate changed around them. In summer, they moved into higher elevations, following herds through thawed valleys. In winter, they retreated to caves and sheltered woodlands, where firelight reflected off stone walls and smoke curled into the cold night air. Their lives were intertwined with the movements of the animals they hunted and the growth of the plants they gathered. Tracking these ancient movements reveals something profound. Neanderthals understood their landscape intimately. They knew which river crossings froze first, where predators made their dens, which valleys offered the earliest spring growth. They mapped their world not on paper, but in memory, and those memories passed through centuries of survival shaped the trails they walked. Even the distribution of stone tools tells us where they traveled. Flints sourced from faraway quarries appear in sites located dozens of miles away. Some materials were carried over long distances, implying group movement or trade-like exchanges with neighboring bands. The presence of different stone types within one site reveals contact, cooperation, or seasonal overlap between groups, threads tying their scattered communities together. One of the most dramatic forms of ghost tracking comes from hunting blinds and kill sites. Neanderthals were ambush specialists, and their understanding of animal behavior was unparalleled. At sites where they hunted mammoths or woolly rhinos, we find signs of coordinated action, strategically chosen cliff edges where prey could be driven to fall, narrow corridors where animals could be trapped, and carefully prepared locations from which hunters launched their attacks. These strategies required communication, planning, and a shared understanding of the land. Sometimes the ghosts we follow take us into caves. Handprints, charred torches, footprints pressed into soft floors, they reveal movements frozen in time. In one cave, the small footprint of a child stands beside that of an adult, suggesting a moment of shared exploration. In another, wall markings show where torches were dragged along stone, illuminating the way. These are the echoes of moments so mundane, yet so human, that they bridge the vast gulf of time separating us from them. We even track their ghosts through the bones of predators. Neanderthals sometimes left marks on cave bear or lion remains, showing moments of confrontation, or coexistence. A cave occupied seasonally by bears might later be used by Neanderthals, creating layered records of dangerous encounters. Every piece of evidence, every track, every tool, every broken bone, allows us to reconstruct a day in the life of a Neanderthal community. We see a father teaching his son how to read animal tracks. A group following reindeer trails across a frozen plain. A mother gathering firewood while watching for signs of wolves. A little girl chasing falling snowflakes while older siblings prepare hide for clothing. These scenes, though crafted from fragments, are grounded in scientific truth. Tracking Neanderthals across ice and time reveals not only where they moved, but how they thought. Their choices show intelligence shaped by landscape, memory, and experience. Their trails reflect a species deeply at home in a world modern humans would struggle to survive in. They were not aimless wanderers, they were deliberate, attentive, and profoundly connected to their environment. And though the world they knew has vanished, the ghosts of their journeys still linger. In footprints hardened by time. In caves dusted with ancient ash. In stone tools shaped by hands long gone. In the quiet patterns left behind by a species that walked the earth with intention, resilience, and an understanding of the natural world that we may never fully reclaim. Through these faint trails, Neanderthals speak to us still. Not in words, but in paths, in marks, in echoes across frozen valleys. And if we follow these ghosts closely enough, we begin to see not just where they walked, but who they truly were. In the vast, frozen landscapes of the Ice Age, silence was both an ally and an adversary. Snow-muffled footsteps, wind-swallowed whispers, and predators moved like shadows across the tundra. For Neanderthals, this silence became a language, a way of listening to the world, reading its signs, and blending into it with extraordinary skill. They were not reckless chasers of prey. They were quiet hunters, shaped by the demands of a white world where every sound could mean life or death. Imagine a group of Neanderthals crouched behind a line of snow-covered rocks as dawn breaks across a frozen plain. The cold stings their skin, but they remain utterly still. Their breath rises in slow, controlled clouds that fade into the morning air. Ahead of them, a herd of reindeer grazes near the edge of a forest, unaware that eyes sharpened by generations of hunting watched their every movement. Neanderthals knew how to move with the land, how to use wind direction, shadows, and terrain to disappear. They were masters of ambush. Their physical build made them uniquely suited for close-range hunting. Shorter limbs, powerful muscles, and strong grips allowed them to deliver forceful thrusts with heavy spears. Unlike Homo sapiens, who often favored throwing weapons from a distance, Neanderthals relied on precision and proximity. They approached their prey quietly, closing the gap inch by inch, until the moment of action erupted in a burst of coordinated energy. Such hunts demanded teamwork. They required trust. They required the steady courage of individuals who understood that getting close meant facing danger head-on. Consider the hunt for a woolly rhinoceros, a creature weighing several tons, armored with thick skin and a massive horn. A reckless approach would invite death. But Neanderthals observed patterns, how the animal moved its head, how it reacted to scents, where its blind spots lay. They learned to approach from downwind, to wait until the animal's attention drifted, to strike with overwhelming force in the split second when opportunity emerged. Their survival depended on knowledge, painstakingly gathered over centuries, and the ability to enact that knowledge with flawless timing. Their tools reflected this intimate hunting style. Heavy wooden spears hardened by fire, stone-tipped weapons with edges carefully shaped for piercing hide and bone, and cutting tools for rapid butchery, all were built for close encounters. These were not crude weapons. They were refined, balanced, and designed specifically for the challenges of the Ice Age. A single mistake in weapon crafting could cost a life during the hunt, so every detail mattered. Hunting required not just strength, but patience. Neanderthals spent hours tracking herds, learning migration routes, understanding which animals were weak or slow. They read the land through tiny clues, a patch of disturbed snow, a broken twig, a faint scent carried by the wind. Their senses were honed to detect subtle shifts in their environment. This deep awareness, born from necessity, made them unparalleled hunters of megafauna. Their connection to predators was complex. Wolves, cave lions, hyenas, these creatures competed for the same prey. Sometimes their tracks merged, revealing a silent rivalry etched into snow and mud. Neanderthals likely observed predators closely, learning from the movements of wolf packs or the stealth of lions. In some cases, they may have followed predators to scavenge kills; in others, they competed directly, arriving first at a carcass or defending a fresh kill from hyenas with shouts, fire, and coordinated displays of strength. Picture a nighttime hunt illuminated by torchlight. A group moves together through dense forest, their footsteps soft on the snow. Torches flicker, casting long shadows among the trees. They are not reckless. They know the dangers that lurk in the dark: bears in caves, lions stalking silently between the trunks. Yet they push forward because this is survival. Every hunt, every animal taken, means food, warmth, and tools for the entire group. The precision of their hunting strategies reveals minds capable of planning several steps ahead. They positioned themselves strategically around valleys or river crossings, anticipating where prey would flee. They used natural features, cliffs, streams, dense thickets, to trap or corner animals. Their intelligence was grounded not in abstract theory, but in a living map of the land they walked daily. They understood terrain the way an architect understands structure, intimately, instinctively, and with deep emotional resonance. Once the kill was made, their efficiency was astonishing. Neanderthals worked together to butcher large animals quickly before scavengers arrived. Their tools left characteristic cut marks that show methodical sequences, removing limbs first, extracting marrow-rich bones, dividing meat into portable pieces. These marks, frozen in time, reveal a choreography of survival, every movement purposeful, every decision informed by experience. Children played a part too. Though they did not join dangerous hunts, they observed from a distance, absorbing knowledge of animal behavior, weather patterns, and group coordination. They learned to read tracks, identify sounds, and recognize the signs of approaching predators. Childhood in Neanderthal societies was not sheltered from the realities of the hunt, it was preparation for adulthood. Winter added even more complexity. When snow blanketed the land and many animals migrated, Neanderthals adapted by exploiting local resources: fish, stored roots, small game. They checked frozen lakes for weak spots where animals had fallen through. They searched forests for hibernating creatures or scavenged carcasses preserved by the cold. Their survival strategies changed with the seasons, demonstrating a flexibility often overlooked in simplistic narratives. But the most profound part of Neanderthal hunting was the emotional dimension. Hunting was not just about food, it was about protecting the group, upholding traditions, and reinforcing bonds. A successful hunt was a moment of celebration, voices raised, meat shared, warmth spreading across the shelter as the group gathered around the fire. These moments of nourishment strengthened the emotional fabric of their community. Even unsuccessful hunts carried meaning. They taught resilience, patience, and collective trust. When prey escaped or the weather turned, the group adapted, relying on each other's strength and knowledge. Their lives were shaped by cycles of effort and endurance, not by constant victory. To move silently through snow, to track a herd across shifting winds, to face a charging beast with nothing but a spear, these acts demanded a kind of bravery rooted in experience rather than bravado. Neanderthals were not wild savages. They were thoughtful hunters who used caution, skill, and cooperation to navigate a world full of immense danger and opportunity. The white world did not forgive mistakes, but it rewarded mastery. And Neanderthals mastered it, becoming some of the most skilled hunters ever to walk the earth. Their quiet footsteps on frozen ground, their steady breaths in icy air, and their unwavering focus reveal a species in perfect harmony with the land it inhabited. In the silent expanses of the Ice Age, they moved like ghosts, present, powerful, and profoundly attuned to the rhythms of nature. They were the quiet hunters, shaped by snow and shadow, whose legacy still whispers through the ancient landscapes they once called home. Across the Ice Age world, the story of Neanderthals was not only told through hunts and survival, it was told through families. In the shelter of caves, beneath overhanging cliffs, and within wind-blocked forests, Neanderthal parents raised children in one of the most unforgiving environments Earth has ever known. And yet, their approach to parenthood was deeply human, protective, patient, warm, and woven with traditions older than memory. To understand their lives fully, we must imagine not only the hunters, but the mothers and fathers who shaped each new generation with care. A newborn Neanderthal entered the world surrounded by cold, danger, and uncertainty. But they also entered a circle of arms. These infants were not raised by mothers alone, the entire group shared responsibility. Fathers, siblings, and even unrelated adults took part in nurturing. This cooperative care, seen in many hunter-gatherer societies, was essential in a landscape where losing a single child could mean losing the future strength of the group. A Neanderthal mother cradled her child not just for warmth, but to pass down knowledge through touch, sound, and presence. Infancy required constant vigilance. Fires needed tending, shelters needed insulating, predators lurked nearby. A child's cry could attract unwanted attention, so parents learned to soothe quickly, rocking gently or humming low rhythmic tones. These sounds, vibrations felt through the chest, calmed infants who grew up surrounded by deep voices and the steady pulse of communal life. Skin-to-skin warmth was essential. Thick fur hides wrapped around mother and baby created pockets of heat when winter winds cut through the world outside. Neanderthal childhood was surprisingly rich. Though their environments were harsh, their communities offered constant interaction. Children spent their days near adults who crafted tools, prepared hides, and gathered wood. While playing with stones, sticks, and bones, they imitated the tasks they saw, learning through observation and repetition. This learning style was natural, intuitive, and deeply rooted in survival. A small child might practice scraping bark from a branch. A slightly older one might watch an elder shape flint, mesmerized by the precision of each strike. The pace of Neanderthal development differed from Homo sapiens. Their bodies matured faster, but their brains developed at a slower, more deliberate pace. This unique combination created a childhood rhythm that balanced physical growth with extended cognitive learning. Parents recognized this. They did not rush children into danger. Instead, they allowed them to grow into strength gradually, step by step, season by season. A father teaching his child to recognize animal tracks would crouch low, pointing to prints in snow or mud. He would guide the child's hand along the edges, helping them understand depth, spacing, direction. These lessons were vital for survival, yet they were also moments of bonding, quiet exchanges between generations, shared under the muted light of winter skies. Mothers, often experts in processing hides and crafting clothing, passed down the fine motor skills needed for daily life. A young girl or boy might sit beside her, watching as she scraped a hide with a stone tool. She would pause often, allowing the children to touch the hide, feel the difference between soft and stiff, understand the transformation from raw skin to usable fur. Through these simple tasks, children learned patience, discipline, and the value of craftsmanship. Socially, Neanderthal children were deeply integrated into the group. Their presence strengthened bonds, inspired cooperation, and encouraged adults to share resources more evenly. A child's laughter near the fire could lift the spirits of an entire group after a long, tiring hunt. Their curiosity sparked exploration, their small discoveries, berries beneath snow, shells near riverbanks, bones in abandoned dens, were celebrated as contributions to the group's survival. But raising a child in such a precarious world was fraught with danger. Injuries and illness were constant threats. And yet, the remains of children show signs of long-term survival even after serious injuries, evidence that the group devoted immense effort to care. A child who broke a bone and healed correctly did so because adults carried them, fed them, and kept them warm through difficult months. This commitment is not the behavior of brutes, it is the behavior of a compassionate, tight-knit humanity. There were moments of deep joy, children chasing each other around a camp, mimicking the calls of animals, or inventing games in the snow. They likely formed strong friendships, learned from older siblings, and grew within a network of relationships that shaped their emotional development. These small, tender moments remind us that their world was not defined solely by hardship. It was also filled with laughter, discovery, and the innocence of youth. As children matured, their roles shifted. Adolescents joined hunting parties, learned to craft more complex tools, and participated in group decisions. They developed the quiet focus that characterized Neanderthal hunting strategies, the sharp awareness needed to sense changes in weather, animal movement, and group dynamics. The transition to adulthood was not marked by a single moment, it was a gradual awakening to responsibility and identity. Parents watched this transition with pride and concern. They had survived countless dangers to raise their children, and now those children stepped into the same world of ice and shadow. But this was the rhythm of Neanderthal life, each generation inheriting the knowledge, strength, and emotional depth of the one before. In the quiet corners of shelters, as firelight danced across stone walls, Neanderthal families rested together. Mothers held their children close, fathers whispered soft instructions for the next day, siblings curled around each other for warmth. These scenes, though imagined, are supported by the physical traces of their lives. The healing bones, the shared hearths, the tools shaped by hands young and old all speak of families woven tightly together. In this world of snow and silence, Neanderthals built something enduring, a culture of care. A way of raising children that balanced strength with tenderness, survival with love. They were mothers of stone and fathers of fire, shaping young minds with patience, guiding young hands with skill, and nurturing young lives with courage beneath the cold ancient sky. To understand the Neanderthal mind, we must imagine a brain shaped not by classrooms, cities, or constant innovation, but by survival in a world where nature was an unforgiving teacher. Their brains were slightly larger than ours on average, yet their intelligence unfolded differently, quietly, deliberately, with a depth tied to sensory experience rather than abstraction. The architecture of their minds reveals a humanity that perceived the world with extraordinary clarity, precision, and grounded awareness. The first thing that stands out about the Neanderthal brain is its shape. Their skulls were elongated, with a pronounced occipital bun at the back. This structure suggests significant development in regions associated with visual processing and motor control. In simple terms, they saw the world vividly, far more richly in detail than we do today. A single footprint in snow, a crack in a piece of flint, a faint shift in the posture of a reindeer, these were cues their brains processed instantly, with remarkable sensitivity. While Homo sapiens developed neural networks for symbolic language, rapid learning, and large social structures, Neanderthals developed networks centered on spatial awareness, sensory integration, and muscle coordination. Their intelligence was embodied, meaning their minds worked seamlessly with their physical abilities. When a Neanderthal lifted a spear, their brain wasn't calculating in abstract terms, it was aligning movement, strength, and timing with an almost instinctive fluency, the result of a lifetime of practiced experience. Memory also played a central role in their cognitive world. Their environment required them to remember seasonal changes, migration patterns, safe shelters, and the location of resources. This memory was not just short-term or emotional, it was long-term, generational. Knowledge wasn't written down, it lived within the minds of individuals and was passed through demonstration and practice. A Neanderthal elder carried a mental map spanning decades, a map filled with valleys, caves, hidden springs, and the tracks of animals long gone. Their sensory world was equally striking. With wide nasal passages and strong facial structures, Neanderthals were adapted to cold climates, but these features also affected their sensory perception. They likely had an acute sense of smell, useful for determining wind direction or detecting predators. Their hearing range overlapped with ours, but their sensitivity to mid-frequency sound suggests they could interpret subtle auditory cues like animal footsteps or the rustle of distant leaves. Their tactile sense was developed too. Hands accustomed to shaping stone could read the texture of rock the way a musician reads strings. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of their cognitive architecture lies in how they processed emotion and social information. Living in small, stable groups meant social bonds were crucial. Their brains had to interpret facial expressions, body language, and tone with accuracy. A single look could indicate danger, reassurance, or a request for help. These subtle communications required neural pathways dedicated to emotional awareness. The same enlarged regions that enhanced sensory perception likely enriched social perception too. Their thought processes were not rushed. Modern humans excel at fast problem-solving, creativity fueled by rapid association, and the ability to juggle multiple abstract concepts at once. Neanderthals, by contrast, were masters of slow cognition. Their decisions were built on careful observation and predictability. When crafting tools, they repeated sequences perfected across generations, each flake removed from stone following a mental blueprint stored deep within muscle memory. Their minds valued consistency, not because they lacked imagination, but because their world rewarded precision. This slower cognitive style extended into how they approached daily tasks. A Neanderthal cutting through hide, for example, concentrated fully on the task. The rhythm of the motion, the sound of the tool scraping, the tension in the material, all these elements merged into a state of deep focus. In a sense, their lives demanded mindfulness long before the concept existed. Their survival depended on being fully present in each moment. Their emotional processing was likely intense. Evidence from their care of the injured suggests profound empathy. Their neural architecture supported long-term attachment and social cohesion. Emotional memories stayed with them, reinforcing bonds within the group. When a member died, the emotional impact would have been felt deeply. Their brains recognized loss, not as an abstract concept, but as a rupture in their social world. One of the most debated aspects of their cognition is symbolic thought. Did they imagine stories? Did they think about the future or reflect on the past? Did they conceive of forces beyond the physical? While we cannot know precisely, evidence of pigment use, engraved bones, and deep cave structures suggests they had the capacity for symbolic or ritualistic behavior. Their brains may have formed simpler symbolic associations than ours, but those associations carried meaning within their culture. A red-stained stone, a patterned mark, or a cave circle might have embodied significance understood by all group members. Another intriguing feature is how their brains approached risk. Neanderthals were cautious, even conservative, in adopting new technologies. This wasn't due to intellectual limitation but to survival logic. In a world with thin margins for error, experimentation could be dangerous. Their cognitive architecture favored methods proven by time, methods that ensured group safety. Their intelligence wasn't about innovation, it was about mastery. Yet mastery can be a form of creativity. When crafting tools or planning hunts, they visualized outcomes, considered multiple possibilities, and coordinated complex movements. This form of practical imagination was essential for their lifestyle. They didn't create symbolic art on cave walls, but they created survival strategies that were elegant in their efficiency and adaptable to ever-changing environments. Their brains were also resilient. They endured trauma, extreme cold, scarcity, and shifting climates. A Neanderthal mind balanced logic with emotional strength. The mental fortitude required to hunt massive animals, care for injured kin, raise children through brutal winters, and navigate unforgiving landscapes speaks to an intelligence grounded in courage and endurance. In understanding their brain architecture, we see a species whose cognition was not inferior but different. A mind shaped by ice and silence. A mind deeply tuned to the physical world. A mind capable of empathy, planning, cooperation, and meaning-making. Their intelligence was not measured in grand inventions or painted walls, it was measured in survival across hundreds of thousands of years in some of Earth's harshest conditions. To step into the architecture of a Neanderthal brain is to step into a world where every decision is deliberate, every sensation meaningful, every memory a tool for survival. It is to glimpse a humanity that lived with clarity and depth, an ancient consciousness that still echoes faintly in the landscapes they once called home. Before cities, roads, and the hum of modern life, Earth was a vast living organism, a world of shifting winds, migrating herds, and forests that stretched endlessly across continents. This was the world Neanderthals inhabited, a world that didn't simply surround them but breathed with them. Their connection to the environment was intimate, almost spiritual, forged through generations of observation and survival. To understand Neanderthals, we must step into the landscapes that shaped their minds and bodies. Ice Age Europe was a mosaic of environments. Towering glaciers sculpted mountains and valleys. Dense pine forests cloaked hillsides, their needles whispering in winter winds. Open grassland stretched far beyond the horizon, filled with mammoths, bison, reindeer, woolly rhinoceroses, and lions. Rivers carved pathways through the land, freezing in winter and swelling with meltwater in spring. Seasons were not gentle, they were extremes that demanded resilience and deep knowledge of the natural world. Neanderthals read this world the way we read books. They understood the patterns of clouds that signaled incoming snow, the subtle change in animal tracks that revealed shifts in herd behavior, the smell of storms riding the wind. They knew which trees provided sturdy wood for tools, which plants grew beneath snowdrifts, and which caves breathed warm air in winter. Their senses, sharpened by necessity, tuned into an environment filled with cues modern humans scarcely notice. The land provided everything: food, shelter, fire, tools. But in return, it demanded awareness. A careless step near a cliff edge or a miscalculated approach to a watering hole could cost lives. Neanderthals moved through this world not as outsiders but as participants. Their footsteps blended with tracks of wolves and bears. Their shelters were extensions of natural formations, overhangs, caves, fallen trunks shaped into protection against the elements. They built with nature, not against it. Yet this world was not static. The climate shifted often, sometimes within a single lifetime. Winters could stretch on longer than expected. Summers could bring droughts. Forests advanced and retreated as glaciers grew and shrank. Neanderthals adapted to these fluctuations by following migrating herds, relocating camps, altering hunting strategies, and adjusting their diets. Their knowledge of ecosystems wasn't intellectual, it was lived, embodied, and passed through experience rather than language. Consider a winter morning in a valley dusted with new snow. Neanderthals emerge from their shelter, their breaths forming clouds in the frigid air. The forest creaks around them as frozen branches expand in the rising sun. They move cautiously, scanning for fresh tracks. The land feels alive, responsive. Birds circle overhead, searching for the first signs of thaw. The group listens, interprets, understands. This was the rhythm of their existence: watching, sensing, reacting. The diversity of habitats they navigated, riversides, caves, mountains, plains, built an adaptive intelligence rooted in familiarity with the natural cycles. They relied on specific migration routes that herds followed year after year. They knew where rivers froze thick enough to cross and where thin ice concealed dangerous currents. They recognized which valleys funneled wind and which slopes offered protection from blizzards. Such knowledge was essential for both survival and community life. Their relationship with fire further deepened their bond with the natural world. Fire was a living element, capable of warmth, light, transformation, and danger. Neanderthals carried embers from one camp to another, tended flames with reverence, and used fire to shape tools, cook food, and ward off predators. Its glow transformed caves into sanctuaries. The crackle of burning wood echoed against stone walls, creating a sensory haven within the vast harshness outside. Animals shaped their mental maps as much as landscapes did. Reindeer indicated seasonal changes. Mammoths provided massive hauls of meat and material. Bears and lions were both threats and competitors. Each species represented a different reading of the land, a piece of a larger ecological puzzle. Neanderthals didn't dominate these animals, they coexisted with them, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in competition. Their lives intertwined with the movements of creatures far older than human memory. There was beauty in their world, too. Sunset stretched across icy plains in shades of violet and fire. Northern lights danced across winter skies, shimmering above the snow-covered earth. Rivers sparkled beneath moonlight. Wildflowers burst through the thawing soil in spring, painting meadows with colors that signaled renewal. Neanderthals experienced all of this not as spectators but as part of the cycle. Their emotions were tethered to the land's moods: fear in storms, awe in cavernous spaces, joy in the return of migrating herds, sorrow when harsh winters claimed lives. Their spirituality, if it existed, likely grew from this intimacy. A cave with warm breath may have seemed alive. A lightning storm may have felt like a message from the sky. The turning of seasons carried meaning long before humans named them. While we cannot know their beliefs, we can imagine a worldview shaped not by gods carved in stone but by the raw forces of nature itself. For Neanderthals, the world didn't simply house them, it embraced them, challenged them, and defined their existence. To walk through the world with Neanderthals is to experience nature in its most primal form. A world without artificial boundaries, without walls, without noise. A world where the Earth's pulse determined daily life. Their survival depended not on reshaping their environment, but on understanding it deeply, so deeply that the land became part of their identity. The world that breathed with them was not gentle, but it was profound. It shaped their minds, guided their movements, and nurtured their culture. And though the Ice Age has long melted away, the memory of that world lingers in every fossil, every preserved footprint, every artifact pulled from ancient soil. It reminds us that once, long before modern humans dominated the planet, there existed a people who moved in harmony with the land, a people who listened to the Earth's breath and understood its language better than we ever will again. There was a time when two kinds of humans walked the same earth, breathed the same cold air, and gazed across the same horizon without knowing how profoundly their destinies would intertwine. For tens of thousands of years, Neanderthals lived in Europe and Western Asia, shaping their world in careful rhythm with the land. But then, from the south, another species began to move, our own ancestors, Homo sapiens. Their encounters did not happen suddenly, nor in dramatic clashes, but through quiet migrations, hesitant meetings, and cautious exchanges that unfolded across generations. This was the moment when human history widened, when two branches of our lineage finally looked into each other's eyes. The Levant, modern-day Israel, Lebanon, Syria, was one of the first crossroads. Here, warm climates and rich resources created a corridor through which populations could mingle. Archaeological layers show a fascinating dance. Neanderthals occupied the region, then sapiens moved in, then Neanderthals again. For tens of thousands of years, the two species alternated in this territory like tides ebbing and flowing. It was a place where worlds overlapped, where the first impressions were likely made not in conflict, but in curiosity. Picture a small band of Neanderthals traveling through a wooded valley. They move silently, alert to every sound. Ahead, they hear voices, not the deep, rhythmic tones of their own kind, but higher, lighter, unfamiliar. They freeze. Peering through trees, they glimpse figures unlike any they have seen, slighter in build, taller, with different faces and movements. Homo sapiens. The newcomers carry tools that appear delicate but finely crafted. Their clothing, stitched with precision, hints at technological advantage. But they also move with caution, sensing the presence of others. The first true encounters may have been from afar, both groups watching each other with a mix of caution and fascination. Neither side understood the other, yet both recognized a shared humanity, two intelligent, social, emotional beings meeting across evolutionary space. What must they have felt? Fear? Wonder? Confusion? Perhaps a strange recognition, a sense of kinship wrapped in unfamiliarity. As contact increased, so did complexity. Some interactions were peaceful and mutually beneficial. Sapiens may have learned hunting strategies suited to northern climates from Neanderthals, who had mastered these environments over hundreds of millennia. Neanderthals may have observed sapiens' symbolic behaviors, their ornamentation, their more elaborate tools. They may have traded materials, communicated through gestures, or merely coexisted in overlapping territories without interference. Other meetings, however, may have been tense. Competition for resources, shelter, prey, water, could spark conflict. Neanderthals, protective of their hunting grounds and families, were formidable opponents. Their raw strength and deep knowledge of the land gave them significant advantages. Sapiens, though fewer in number at first, used speed, cleverness, and coordination to counter these strengths. Not every encounter ended peacefully, not every shared valley became a place of cooperation. Still, evidence suggests that not only conflict but connection defined their early relationship. The clearest proof lies in genetics. Modern humans outside of Africa carry Neanderthal DNA, meaning interbreeding took place. But this wasn't a single brief episode, it happened repeatedly across thousands of years. For this to occur, there must have been moments of intimacy, trust, and shared life between the species. Moments where barriers dissolved and bonds formed, however brief or fragile. Imagine a young Neanderthal woman and a sapiens man crossing paths near a watering hole. Their groups keep a cautious distance, but curiosity draws them closer. They communicate through gestures, sounds, shared food. Over time, trust grows. Such moments, though speculative, are grounded in the genetic legacy they left behind, a legacy written in every person today who carries traces of their union. Beyond intimacy, cultural exchange likely took place as well. Sapiens arriving in colder climates would have needed to learn quickly. Neanderthals, already adapted, may have shown them how to construct effective shelters, create warm clothing, and track European megafauna. In return, sapiens might have introduced new tool-making techniques or symbolic behaviors that Neanderthals adopted in subtle ways. Archaeological sites show hints of blend, Neanderthal tools displaying slight changes aligned with sapiens' influence, and vice versa. The landscapes where they met became zones of transformation. In the open plains of Europe, the two species sometimes occupied nearby caves. They may have followed the same herds, rested at the same rivers, and sheltered beneath the same rock overhangs. Each group left behind hearths, footprints, and tools that archaeologists later uncovered layered upon each other, showing how their lives briefly overlapped. Emotionally, these encounters must have been powerful. To see a different kind of human, similar yet different, would challenge assumptions about identity. Neanderthals, with their deep social bonds, may have felt a sense of threat or confusion at the presence of this new species. Sapiens, encountering a humanity that mirrored their own, may have felt awe or fear. These reactions shaped how the two populations interacted, each encounter blending instinct with curiosity. For both species, the meeting represented a turning point. It introduced new possibilities, but also new pressures. The presence of another human species forced each group to reconsider how they hunted, where they traveled, and how they protected their young. These meetings were not merely biological, they were psychological, altering the way both species viewed the world. As time went on, the interactions deepened, leaving permanent marks on both lineages. The Neanderthals gained exposure to new behaviors and tools. Sapiens gained genetic traits that improved immunity and resilience. Their meeting was not a simple collision, it was an exchange, a dialogue, a merging of strengths and vulnerabilities. Where our paths first crossed was not a battlefield, nor a market, nor a single dramatic event. It was a gradual convergence of two humanities shaped by different environments, different histories, and different minds. Their encounters were quiet, complex, and transformative. They were moments of recognition between distant cousins separated by evolution, yet joined by fate. In these early meetings, the story of our shared humanity began, a story of cooperation and conflict, interbreeding and learning, fear and fascination. A story that ultimately changed the destiny of both species. It was here, in the valleys and caves of the ancient world, that two worlds touched, and the future of humanity shifted forever. When two human species meet, the story that unfolds is never simple. It is not only a tale of conflict or cooperation, but of something far more intimate, an exchange of breath, of knowledge, of shared struggles beneath cold skies. Between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, this exchange would shape the genetic future of millions, altering bodies, abilities, and even vulnerabilities. It was a merging not just of bloodlines, but of worlds. As modern humans spread into Eurasia, they encountered Neanderthal groups who had lived there for hundreds of thousands of years. Sapiens arrived with new ideas, new tools, and a willingness to explore unfamiliar territories. Neanderthals, with their deep knowledge of the land, were both rivals and guides, both obstacles and bridges. The interactions between them varied by region and moment, sometimes peaceful, sometimes tense, sometimes transformative. One of the most profound exchanges happened through interbreeding. It wasn't rare or accidental. Genetic evidence shows that multiple interbreeding events happened over thousands of years. For these unions to occur again and again, there must have been moments of trust, attraction, and shared life between individuals of both species. This challenges earlier narratives that imagined violent encounters or forced pairings. Instead, it points toward relationships, fleeting or enduring, formed across boundaries of species. Picture a group of sapiens seeking shelter from a storm, stumbling into a valley where Neanderthals have built a winter camp. The two groups keep their distance at first. But as days pass, gestures replace fear. A shared fire offers warmth against the biting wind. A carcass of large game becomes a communal meal. Slowly, barriers soften. Among these interactions, one pair might form a bond, two individuals who see beyond differences to recognize something familiar: loneliness, desire, companionship. From these quiet bonds, children were born, hybrids carrying the legacy of both lineages. These children would have grown up in complex social spaces. Their features reflected two worlds, a mixture of robust Neanderthal traits and slender sapiens ones. Their minds, shaped by the cultural norms of whichever group raised them, may have held cognitive flexibility that drew from both traditions. Some hybrids lived among sapiens, contributing Neanderthal traits to future generations. Others remained with Neanderthals, becoming bridges between communities. Their existence changed the story of humanity forever. But blood wasn't the only thing exchanged. Technology flowed both ways. Sapiens brought blade-based toolkits and refined bone tools. Neanderthals had perfected close-range hunting weapons and specialized stoneworking techniques that had endured for millennia. At some archaeological sites, the two technologies blend, pointing toward mutual learning rather than one-sided dominance. Materials were exchanged as well. Certain types of flint traveled across regions inhabited by both species, suggesting trade or shared resource networks. Sapien ornaments made of shells and pigments appear in areas once dominated by Neanderthals, showing cultural diffusion. Likewise, Neanderthal craftsmanship influenced sapiens who settled in their territories, evidenced by tool hybrids that combined strategies from both cultures. The exchange extended into food practices. Sapiens arriving from warmer climates had to adapt quickly to the cold, and Neanderthals, experts of Ice Age ecology, provided models for surviving severe winters. They knew which plants could be eaten raw, which roots survived beneath frost, and which animal organs offered vital nutrients. Sapiens, in turn, introduced variety: fish, small game, and gathered foods from their expanding repertoire. This blending of diets improved resilience for both groups. Even disease was part of the exchange. Neanderthals carried pathogens adapted to Eurasian environments. Sapiens brought others from Africa. When the two species met, their bodies confronted unfamiliar threats. Some perished from new diseases. Others survived and passed on immunity encoded in genes that still exist in many humans today. Certain Neanderthal gene variants strengthened our immune response, others increased risk of conditions like allergies or autoimmune disorders. This genetic inheritance is a reminder that contact between species always has biological consequences. Not all exchanges were peaceful. Competing for territory and prey occasionally led to confrontation. In some narrow valleys or resource-rich areas, conflict may have been inevitable. A hunting ground that supported one group comfortably might struggle to support two. Tension could rise over water sources, cave shelters, or migration routes. These conflicts were not constant warfare but episodic clashes, moments where fear outweighed curiosity, where survival instincts overshadowed cooperation. Yet the coexistence lasted far too long, over 10,000 years, for conflict to have been the main story. Coexistence requires rules, formal or unwritten. Perhaps each group understood territorial boundaries. Perhaps they practiced avoidance or seasonal separation. Perhaps elders guided decisions that minimized risk of conflict, ensuring future generations survived without unnecessary loss. The psychological impact of meeting another human species must have been profound. Sapiens, encountering Neanderthals' strength and familiarity, may have felt a mixture of awe and fear. Neanderthals, seeing the rapid spread and adaptive strategies of sapiens, may have sensed both threat and opportunity. Their eyes met across fires, across forests, across riverbanks, and in those moments, both species would have recognized something mirrored in the other: intelligence, emotion, and the unmistakable spark of sentience. These exchanges, of breath, blood, knowledge, and presence, created a ripple that still touches us today. The Neanderthal DNA in our bodies influences our immunity, our skin, even aspects of our mood and sleep. The tools we use, the landscapes we inhabit, and the ways we interpret the world carry whispers of the interactions that shaped early Eurasia. The meeting of Neanderthals and sapiens was not a single event. It was a long dialogue between species, sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted, sometimes expressed through the silent exchange of glances across a snowy plain. Through connection and conflict, through union and separation, these two kinds of humans shaped each other. And though the Neanderthals eventually disappeared, their breath lingers in ours. Their blood pulses in millions of people alive today. The exchange that took place in ancient valleys and forests became one of the defining chapters of the human story, a chapter written not in words, but in the shared inheritance of two worlds that once coexisted beneath the vast sky of prehistory. There comes a point in every story where the shadows begin to lengthen, where the world shifts beneath the feet of those who once walked with confidence. For Neanderthals, this turning point was not a single cataclysm, but a slow, creeping pressure, a tightening vice as climate, competition, and time itself began to push them toward the margins. To understand their final centuries, we must imagine what it felt like not just to face external threats, but to live with the quiet, haunting awareness that the world was changing faster than they could. The Ice Age climate was notorious for its unpredictability. Temperatures swung drastically over short periods. Forests expanded, then vanished. Grasslands turned to tundra, then back again. These swings created chaotic conditions that even the most experienced Neanderthal group struggled to navigate. Their survival strategies, deeply rooted in stable habits and refined over thousands of years, were suddenly challenged by environments that no longer behaved as they once did. Imagine a Neanderthal elder standing at the edge of a valley he has known since childhood. The river has dried earlier than expected. The herds that once passed through like clockwork have shifted their route. The sheltering trees have thinned, and storms arrive with unfamiliar violence. Something is wrong, though he cannot name it. The Earth he once understood is becoming unpredictable. Into this already unstable world came a new threat, Homo sapiens. Not in great waves at first, but in small, persistent groups that expanded steadily. Where a Neanderthal band once roamed freely, they now found signs of other humans, footprints near watering holes, fire pits still warm with embers, tools made of stone flakes sharper than any they had seen. The presence of sapiens was like a faint echo that grew louder with each passing generation. Neanderthals were not wiped out overnight. Instead, they experienced increasing pressure on all sides. Some bands encountered violent conflict, driven by competition for hunting grounds. Others found themselves pushed into less desirable territories, rugged cliffs, isolated mountain valleys, or forests too dense for easy travel. With shrinking populations came shrinking networks. Fewer individuals meant less ability to share knowledge, find mates, or support the sick and elderly. Isolation is a slow killer. Genetic diversity dwindles, social structures weaken, and adaptability fades. A species that had survived for hundreds of thousands of years suddenly found itself struggling to maintain its foothold. Yet the psychological toll was perhaps the most profound. Neanderthals were deeply emotional beings with strong familial bonds. They understood loss, fear, and uncertainty. As winters grew harsher and group numbers dwindled, they must have felt the weight of decline. Parents watched their children face harder conditions than they themselves had known. Elders mourned the disappearance of familiar landscapes. Young hunters returned empty-handed from territories that once teemed with animals. Picture a circle of Neanderthals gathered around a fire on a frigid night. The flames flicker weakly, wood is scarce. Snow presses against the edges of their shelter. Silence hangs heavy as the group contemplates the absence of others who once sat among them. They remember cousins who migrated south and never returned. They recall injuries that healed poorly because there were too few hands to help. They sense, without understanding why, that their world is contracting. This emotional strain may have affected decision-making. Where once they relied on established patterns of movement, now they faced unfamiliar landscapes with fewer guides. Their deep presence in familiar territories became a disadvantage when those territories changed too rapidly. The slow, deliberate intelligence that had served them so well made it harder to adapt quickly to novelty. Meanwhile, sapiens demonstrated flexibility. When prey shifted, they shifted too. When landscapes changed, they experimented with new tools, new hunting styles, new shelters. Their ability to innovate rapidly gave them an edge. They formed larger networks, enabling the flow of ideas and support across wider areas. These connected groups could withstand hardships better than smaller, isolated Neanderthal bands. Still, Neanderthals persisted. They fought. They adapted where they could. They survived longer in certain refuges, coastal caves, mountain passes, places where resources remained reliable. For thousands of years after sapiens entered Europe, Neanderthals continued their traditions, caring for their injured, crafting tools, raising children. They were not passive victims of extinction, they resisted it with the dignity and determination that defined their species. But each generation faced greater difficulty. Infant mortality rose. Food became harder to find. Injuries from conflict increased. Climate swings grew more extreme. Slowly, the threads holding their communities together began to fray. In some regions, remnants of Neanderthal groups encountered small bands of sapiens and merged with them through interbreeding. In these cases, their lineage continued, not through cultural survival, but through genetic inheritance. Children born from such unions carried a blend of traits, their bodies and minds shaped by two worlds. Yet the Neanderthal way of life, their traditions, their quiet wisdom, their deep-rooted relationship with the land, these elements faded as sapiens' populations grew and absorbed them. The final centuries of Neanderthal existence may have been filled with poignant moments. A mother comforting her child during a severe winter, whispering softly as winds howled outside. A hunter realizing that the patterns of prey he learned in youth no longer held true. A small band moving from cave to cave, seeking a place where memories still matched reality. Their resilience persisted, but their foothold weakened. The end did not come dramatically. There was no single battle, no sudden collapse. Instead, Neanderthals faded from the archaeological record like fading footprints in melting snow. Their last strongholds, perhaps in the caves of Gibraltar or remote mountain regions, held on as long as they could. But one by one, the fires went out. The last child was born. The last elder died. The last voices fell silent beneath the ancient sky. To live at the edge of extinction is to experience a unique form of consciousness, one marked by confusion, grief, and unspoken fear. Neanderthals felt these emotions. They understood, on some level, that their world was slipping away. Their minds, shaped by generations of endurance, faced a challenge they could not overcome. Yet their story does not end in tragedy alone. Though their bodies vanished, their legacy endured. Their DNA still flows through millions of people. Their survival techniques influenced early sapiens. Their memory, once obscured by misunderstanding, is now being reclaimed. A mind at the edge of extinction is not a failed mind. It is a mind that fought until the final breath, a mind that shaped ice, shadow, and silence into a home for over 300,000 years. Their story is not one of defeat, but of endurance. And in remembering their final moments, we honor a humanity that walked alongside ours and left its quiet imprint on the world we inherited. In the waning twilight of the Neanderthal world, scattered groups clung to life in pockets of Europe where the cold winds softened, where forests still offered refuge, and where the ancient rhythms of the land had not yet been fully disrupted. These were the last refuges, the final strongholds where Neanderthals built their shelters, lit their fires, and held on to the traditions passed down through countless generations. To step into these spaces is to witness a humanity suspended on the edge of disappearance, yet still fighting to preserve what remained of their world. One of the most evocative refuges lies in the southern tip of Europe, Gibraltar. Here, steep limestone cliffs rose above the roaring sea, and deep caves offered warmth and protection against the Atlantic winds. Within these caverns, archaeologists discovered traces of Neanderthal life long after they had vanished from the rest of the continent. Hearths with layers of ash, bones of seals and birds, stone tools shaped with practiced hands, all spoke of a people who held on when the rest of their kind had already faded. Imagine one of these shelters, a dark, spacious cave overlooking waters gray with mist. At its entrance, a small group of Neanderthals gathers driftwood carried by tides to feed their fire. The flames illuminate faces lined with hardship but filled with resilience. Within the cave walls, echoes carry the soft murmurs of conversation, the scraping of bone tools, the steady rhythm of survival. This was not a place of despair, it was a sanctuary carved out by determination. The architecture of these shelters, though simple in form, reflected deep knowledge of the environment. Neanderthals chose caves with natural insulation, positioned hearths where smoke could escape without choking the air, and arranged sleeping areas away from drafts. Stones were placed to stabilize fire pits, bones repurposed for tools, and hides laid across rock surfaces to soften the cold. Every part of their shelter was deliberate, refined over generations of experience. In some caves, remnants of repeated hearths reveal a striking pattern, the same spot used again and again across centuries. This consistency was not accidental. It signified memory, a cultural continuity that persisted even amid decline. The last architects of their species returned to familiar places, drawing comfort from spaces their ancestors had shaped. These shelters became anchors in a world slipping out of their grasp. Their days followed rhythms dictated by the harshness of the environment. At dawn, the group ventured out to gather shellfish along the rocky coast, or to check traps laid near forest edges. The sea offered new resources, fish, seals, seabirds, introducing dietary shifts that suggest adaptability even in their final chapters. Neanderthals, long thought resistant to change, demonstrated flexibility as they integrated marine foods into their survival strategy. Inside the shelter, the tasks of daily life continued. Children practiced shaping small rocks, mimicking the movements of adults. Elders taught younger members how to find edible plants in sparse terrain, how to track the seasonal flow of resources, how to prepare hides for warmth. Even with dwindling numbers, they preserved the rituals of teaching and learning that defined their culture. But as group sizes shrank, their world grew quieter. Where once dozens may have shared a fire, now only a handful remained. This isolation affected every aspect of their lives. Social bonds, once strengthened by communal tasks, now carried the weight of irreplaceability. Each person played a crucial role. The loss of even one adult, whether to illness, injury, or conflict, left a gap difficult to fill. Their mental resilience was tested as never before. Picture a night deep inside one of these shelters. The fire burns low, its glow casting trembling shadows across stone walls. A mother whispers softly to her child, comforting them against the cold. Nearby, an elder stares into the flames, remembering winters long past when the cave was filled with laughter and conversation. Outside, the wind howls like a distant warning, its voice echoing through the entrance. The group knows the world beyond is not the same one their ancestors knew. The forests grow thinner. The animals move differently. Strange humans occupy nearby valleys. And yet, the last architects refuse to surrender. Their stone tools from this period reveal intricate skill. They refined blade edges with meticulous care, maximizing the utility of every flake of stone. They fashioned bone points and wooden shafts with the precision of master craftsmen. Their creativity persisted, even as their numbers dwindled. In these tools lies a poignant truth: the Neanderthal mind remained sharp until the very end. Some shelters show evidence of symbolic behavior that continued into their final years. Manganese dioxide, a black pigment, appears in late Neanderthal layers, possibly used for body decoration or ritual. In one cave, abstract engravings suggest purposeful marking, expressions of identity or memory. These acts hint at an emotional and cognitive world that persisted even under immense pressure. But despite their resilience, external forces tightened around them. The climate continued its volatile shifts, reducing available resources. Homo sapiens populations grew, expanding into territories once dominated by Neanderthals. Competition intensified. Even if interactions were sometimes peaceful or cooperative, the sheer numbers of sapiens made coexistence difficult. The world gradually tilted in favor of the newcomers. Inside their shelters, Neanderthal groups must have felt this encroachment. New sounds, human voices, unfamiliar tools striking stone, distant fires, echoed through landscapes once filled solely with the songs of wind and animals. The sense of being overshadowed, outnumbered, and unable to reclaim lost territories must have weighed heavily on their minds. Imagine the final winter of a small Neanderthal band. Food is scarce. A storm seals the cave entrance with snow, and the fire is kept alive only through careful rationing of wood. The group huddles together, sharing warmth. They speak less now, every breath matters in the cold. But their eyes still shine with the same determination their ancestors carried. They endure because that is what they have always done. Eventually, one shelter becomes truly the last. A final refuge where the last architect resides. Perhaps it was a cave in Gibraltar, or a hidden valley in the Pyrenees, or a forested slope near the Black Sea. Wherever it was, its final occupants faced a world no longer aligned with their way of life. Their skills, once perfectly suited to the Ice Age, could not compete with the rapid changes unfolding around them. And then, one day, a fire burned for the last time in a Neanderthal shelter. The last architect, an elder, a hunter, a mother, a child, breathed their final breath. The stone tools remained where they fell. The hearth cooled. The echo of footsteps faded into silence. Yet their legacy did not vanish. It lived on in the DNA of those who followed. It lived on in the memories encoded in landscapes shaped by their presence. It lived on in the archaeological traces that allow us to reconstruct their final days. The last architect's shelter was not just a place of survival, it was a monument to resilience, creativity, and humanity. In those final flames and final footsteps lies a story of a species that refused to disappear quietly. Their shelters stand as silent witnesses to their courage, their brilliance, and the bittersweet end of a world carved by Neanderthal hands. When the last Neanderthal fell silent, they left behind no written stories, no carved tablets, no oral traditions passed into later generations. All that remained were bones, tools, pigments, and fragments of shelter, objects scattered across caves and plains, waiting for the future to rediscover them. These remnants are powerful, but incomplete. They tell us what Neanderthals did, but not always why. They show movement, skill, injury, and survival, but often fail to reveal the inner worlds that shaped those actions. What the bones could not say is the silent heart of their story. Every discovery, every artifact pulled from the earth, raises as many questions as it answers. Consider the carefully buried bodies found in some Neanderthal sites. The bones are arranged in postures that suggest deliberate placement rather than careless disposal. But what meaning did these burials hold? Were they acts of love, attempts to shield the dead from scavengers, rituals of farewell, or something more symbolic? The bones cannot tell us. They cannot reveal the emotions felt by a mother kneeling beside her child's body, or the thoughts of a group gathered in mourning around a fresh grave. Then there are the enigmatic marks carved into bones and stones, parallel lines, crosses, zigzags. Were these symbols? Decorations? Practice marks? We know they weren't accidental, they required control and intention. But their meaning remains sealed in the silence of deep time. A single engraved bone may represent a moment of creativity, a teaching tool, a territorial marker, or even an attempt to capture a memory. The material survives, but the message does not. Pigments also whisper of hidden meanings. Traces of ochre and manganese dioxide appear in Neanderthal layers, showing they collected and used color. But for what purpose? Did they paint their bodies before a hunt? Mark tools to indicate ownership or identity? Decorate their shelters? Create symbols that have since faded from existence? The presence of pigment unlocks possibilities of aesthetic expression, ritual behavior, or social signaling, but the bones remain quiet about which. Fire hearths tell us where Neanderthals gathered, but not the conversations exchanged around the flames. We can see where they sat, where tools were shaped, where food was cooked. But we cannot hear the laughter, the arguments, the stories mimed with expressive gestures, the lullabies murmured to restless children. We cannot hear the sighs of sorrow after losing a group member or the triumphant shouts after a successful hunt. Fireplaces hold ashes, but not memories. The tools they left behind, beautiful, symmetrical, efficient, reveal astonishing skill. But they do not reveal the pride a toolmaker felt in crafting a perfect blade, or the frustration when a stone fractured in the wrong direction. They cannot show the patience of an elder teaching a young one to remove flakes at the correct angle, or the gratitude of a hunter receiving a new spear point just before winter. The bones show technique, they hide emotion. Even injuries leave silent gaps. Healed fractures show care and compassion. We know someone tended the wounded, fed them, protected them. But we cannot know the dynamics of those moments. Who brought water to the injured? Who stayed awake through long nights to ensure predators did not approach the shelter? Who mourned when healing was impossible and death came slowly? The bones record survival, they conceal the tenderness or fear that made survival possible. Perhaps the deepest silence comes from the absence of spoken language. We know Neanderthals had the anatomy to speak. We know their brains supported complex communication. But not a single word survives. What did a Neanderthal name sound like? How did they call to one another across forests? What words expressed love, anger, or hope? Did they have songs? Did they chant during rituals? Did they create rhythms with their voices in deep caves where echoes transformed their sound into something magical? The bones say nothing, leaving us to imagine their voices lost on the wind. The landscapes where they lived also hold unanswered questions. Why did some groups return to the same cave for generations? What significance did certain cliffs, springs, or valleys hold? Did they have sacred places, spots where they felt closer to ancestors, where they marked transitions or celebrated events? Stone arrangements in caves hint at ritual behavior, but the bones cannot explain the beliefs behind those acts. Nor can they reveal the dreams that filled Neanderthal minds. Did they imagine spirits in the firelight? Did they sense meaning in the stars? Did they believe in an afterlife or feel the presence of the dead? Such questions linger at the edge of archaeology, beyond the reach of tangible evidence. We search for clues in pigments, burials, engravings, and tools, but the answers remain elusive. Yet this silence is not emptiness. It is a space where imagination and empathy meet science. What the bones cannot say, the living can infer through evidence and human intuition. Their silence invites us to see Neanderthals not as puzzles to be solved, but as people whose inner lives deserve respect. Their world was filled with love, fear, curiosity, pride, loss, and wonder, emotions as universal as the Ice Age wind. Every bone that cannot speak reminds us that humanity is more than what we leave in the ground. The physical traces are only fragments of a much richer existence, one filled with stories, relationships, values, and dreams. Neanderthals were no different. Their bones whisper of strength and survival, but the deepest truths of their lives lived in the invisible realm of feeling. What the bones could not say is precisely what makes their story so haunting. They were humans without a written voice, a people whose minds and souls must be reconstructed from shadows and echoes. We read their skeletons, but their hearts remain beyond reach. And yet, in that silence, we find the beauty of mystery, the reminder that even in extinction, their humanity persists in ways that transcend bones, time, and science. Theirs is a story incomplete, yes, but not empty. A story written partly in matter and partly in absence. A story whose missing chapters invite us to listen more carefully, to the caves, the tools, the ashes, and to the quiet spaces where meaning lingers long after the bones have fallen silent. Long after the last Neanderthal vanished from the world, they remained within us, not just as shadows in the archaeological record, but as living echoes written into our bodies, our minds, and perhaps even our emotions. Their extinction was not an erasure, it was a merging. A quiet blending of two humanities whose paths crossed, intertwined, and left marks that endure tens of thousands of years later. The Neanderthals did not entirely disappear. Parts of them still breathe in us today. Genetic evidence tells one of the clearest chapters of this story. Most people outside Africa carry between 1 and 4 Neanderthal DNA. These traces are not random, they are functional, influential, shaping elements of our physiology and behavior. In our skin, immunity, metabolism, and even sleep cycles, we find whispers of Neanderthal heritage. Each gene passed down from them is like a small inheritance from a distant ancestor, a fragment of their evolutionary wisdom embedded in our own survival. Some of these inherited traits strengthened us in unfamiliar environments. Neanderthals had spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to cold climates, diverse pathogens, and shifting ecosystems across Europe and Western Asia. When Homo sapiens moved northward, interbreeding allowed them to borrow resilience from Neanderthal genomes. Variations that helped manage temperature regulation, resist certain viruses, or process fats more efficiently entered our lineage. These genes improved our odds of thriving in foreign landscapes. Even elements of our immune system bear their imprint. Some Neanderthal variants helped modern humans fight off diseases prevalent in Eurasia. Others shaped our inflammatory responses. Though not always beneficial, some may contribute to allergies or autoimmune conditions, they nonetheless reveal a deep entanglement between our biology and theirs. Their struggles, victories, and adaptations became woven into the code of our species. But the legacy is not purely physical. Behavioral and emotional influences may echo from our shared ancestry. Neanderthals' heightened sensory perception, deep emotional bonds, and strong memory networks may have left subtle traces in the human psyche. Certain genetic variants linked to mood regulation, stress response, or circadian rhythms appear to come from Neanderthals. It is tempting to imagine that aspects of our introspective nature, our capacity for quiet observation or our deep attachment to loved ones, carry faint echoes of the emotional landscapes Neanderthals once navigated. Their legacy is also cultural, though indirect. Modern humans who encountered Neanderthals learned from them survival strategies, hunting techniques, and knowledge of northern ecosystems. Some technologies bear hybrid influences. Some symbolic behaviors may have been inspired or accelerated by contact with another intelligent species. In this sense, Neanderthals shaped not only our genes but our development as a cultural species. Yet the deepest imprint is philosophical. Knowing that another kind of human once shared the world with us changes how we understand ourselves. It humbles us. It expands our idea of humanity beyond a single lineage, showing us that our species was once part of a broader, richer tapestry of human forms. The presence of Neanderthal DNA within us is not merely biological, it is a reminder that we are not the sole inheritors of the human experience. Think of a modern human standing on a snowy ridge beneath a cold sky. Their breath rises in pale clouds, just as Neanderthal breath once did. Their eyes scan the land for movement, just as Neanderthal eyes once did. Their heart quickens at the sound of a crack in the trees, just as Neanderthal hearts once did. The continuity of these sensations across species and time reveals a shared heritage deeper than words. The soul imprinted in us is not a literal soul, but a metaphor for everything that made Neanderthals human: their empathy, their creativity, their resilience, their sense of belonging to the land. These qualities left impressions in the archaeological record but also in the very structure of our understanding. When we care for the sick, when we sit quietly around a fire, when we admire the stars or enter a cave with reverence, we mirror actions that Neanderthals performed long before us. Their architectural mind, attuned to symmetry, structure, and spatial awareness, may reflect in our own fascination with building, crafting, shaping. Their emotional warmth, shown through care of the injured and protection of children, resonates in our social instincts. Their contemplative intelligence, patient, focused, grounded, still survives in the parts of us drawn to solitude, to nature, to slow and deliberate creation. Even our physical gestures may carry ancestral echoes. The way we use tools, cradle children, lean close to share warmth, these behaviors stretch far back into shared prehistory. We feel their presence not consciously, but in the instinctive patterns written into our species through millennia of coexistence. Their extinction was not complete disappearance, it was transformation. They became part of us, and through us, they continue to influence the world. Every person alive today with traces of Neanderthal ancestry carries a living memorial to a species that once thrived across the Ice Age world. Their DNA is not fossilized. It is active, shaping cells, influencing traits, guiding biological processes. But perhaps the most meaningful imprint lies in our growing desire to understand them. For centuries, Neanderthals were dismissed as brutes, misunderstood, misrepresented, caricatured. Now, through science and empathy, we rediscover their humanity. In doing so, we restore to them what extinction took away: identity, dignity, and presence. This act of recognition is itself an imprint, evidence that their legacy reaches beyond genes into the realm of human understanding. We seek their stories not only to know them, but to better understand ourselves. Their strengths illuminate our weaknesses. Their abilities highlight our differences. And their disappearance warns us that intelligence alone is not enough to survive a changing world. In every heartbeat that carries their DNA, in every quiet moment of reflection, in every instinct to nurture or protect, the Neanderthal soul lingers, not as a ghost, but as a living thread woven into the fabric of humanity. They did not vanish. They became part of who we are. Imagine, for a moment, a world where the Neanderthals did not vanish. A world where two intelligent human species, Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis, continued to walk the earth side by side. The story of humanity would be unrecognizable. Our cultures, technologies, cities, and identities would be shaped by the presence of another kind of human mind living alongside ours. This alternate timeline is not fantasy, it is a question rooted in real evolutionary possibility. And exploring it reveals profound insights into what it truly means to be human. If Neanderthals had survived into the modern era, our first and most immediate shift would be in identity. Humanity would not be singular. We would grow up knowing that intelligence, emotion, and culture are not exclusive to our species. Children would learn in school about two human civilizations, two human evolutions, two human ways of thinking. The phrase, "we are all human," would expand to include beings who look similar yet distinctly different, broader faces, powerful builds, deeper voices. The psychological impact would reshape every discipline from philosophy to politics. Modern cities might include Neanderthal neighborhoods, built with architectural styles reflecting their spatial strengths. Their homes could be optimized for durability, warmth, and tactile comfort. Their craftsmanship, rooted in precision and long-term mastery rather than rapid innovation, might result in tools, furniture, and structures admired for their strength and longevity. While sapiens favor speed and variety, Neanderthals might favor refinement and permanence. In the workplace, their cognitive style would redefine roles. Neanderthals excelled at spatial reasoning, sensory awareness, deep focus, and physical coordination. They might thrive as master builders, artisans, wilderness experts, trackers, structural engineers, and fire specialists. Their patience and precision would complement the sapiens' tendency toward abstract thinking, rapid problem-solving, and symbolic creativity. Together, the two species could form teams with remarkable balance, an evolutionary synergy rather than competition. Culturally, Neanderthal traditions would bring a new dimension to human expression. Their rituals might involve deep cave gatherings, rhythmic chanting, or fire-based ceremonies reflecting their ancient relationship with darkness and stone. Their art, perhaps more subtle or tactile than ours, might emphasize textures, engravings, and structural patterns. Museums today might display not only sapiens cave paintings, but Neanderthal stone architecture, pigment art, and ceremonial circles of stalagmites, traditions that would have evolved over millennia into unique cultural masterpieces. Language would evolve differently in a shared world. Neanderthals' deeper voices and potentially slower speech rhythms might influence linguistic diversity, creating languages rich with tonal variation and tactile gestures. Sapiens' languages, shaped by speed and abstraction, would blend with Neanderthal communication styles, resulting in hybrid languages built on rhythm, tone, and presence. Schools might teach children to understand both sapien-style speech and Neanderthal nonverbal cues. Interbreeding, already part of our shared past, would likely continue. Families might include parents of both species, children with mixed features, and communities where genetic diversity expands across generations. Over time, a spectrum of hybrid traits might emerge, some individuals bearing stronger sapiens characteristics, others expressing Neanderthal strengths. The very notion of species boundaries would shift, challenging our ideas of difference and belonging. But coexistence would not be without tension. Two human species with distinct needs and strengths would face challenges in politics, territorial rights, and resource access. Societies might debate issues of representation, how Neanderthal voices should be included in governance, whether their cultural practices deserve legal protection, how to ensure equality in a world shaped historically by sapiens' expansion. Prejudice could arise, fueled by physical differences or outdated stereotypes. But so too could movements advocating mutual respect, celebrating diversity as one of humanity's greatest assets. Religion and philosophy would be transformed. Many worldviews today rest on human uniqueness, the idea that we alone possess a certain kind of soul or consciousness. The continued existence of Neanderthals would force us to rethink such assumptions. Theologians might debate whether both species share the same spiritual essence. Philosophers might explore how two forms of intelligence interpret morality, purpose, or beauty. Neanderthal perspectives, shaped by deep presence and sensory awareness, could enrich humanity's understanding of meaning. Technology, too, would evolve differently. While sapiens drive rapid innovation, Neanderthals excel at durability and refinement. Joint innovation might produce breakthroughs unavailable to either species alone. Tools that combine sapiens' creativity with Neanderthal precision. Architecture that blends our love of aesthetics with their instinct for stability. Environmental stewardship shaped by their intimate knowledge of natural systems and our capacity for large-scale organization. Even our relationship with the earth might shift. Neanderthals' profound connection to landscape, seasons, and animal behavior could inform sustainable practices. Their slower, more grounded cognitive style might balance our tendency toward rapid development. In this world, modern society might include protected Neanderthal ancestral lands, cultural reserves within ancient caves, and laws preserving sacred natural sites. And perhaps most movingly, the emotional bond between the species would reshape humanity's idea of kinship. We would not be alone. We would share the world with another kind of human, one that feels deeply, thinks differently, and sees the world through ancient eyes. Their presence would remind us that intelligence evolves in many forms and that humanity is richer when multiple perspectives coexist. Though this world never came to be, its possibility reveals something essential. The story of Neanderthals is not just a tale of extinction, but a reflection on what humanity could have been, and what it still might become. If another humanity had survived, our differences would have become bridges rather than barriers, lessons rather than threats. Their absence leaves a quiet ache in the human story. A sense that something profound was lost, not just a species, but an alternative way of being human. And by imagining the world they could have shared with us, we honor the richness of the worlds they once created on their own. Every stone lifted, every shelter built, every pattern carved into the world around us carries the inheritance of our deep ancestry. Though the Neanderthals are gone, the architectural instinct, the urge to create structure, order, and meaning in the physical world, lives on within us. Their hands shaped the Ice Age landscapes long before our cities rose, and their way of seeing space, form, and material may still echo subtly in the modern human mind. In recognizing this, we uncover a powerful truth: the architects they were continue to live within the architects we are. Neanderthal architecture was not monumental in the way we define structures today. They did not build towering temples or sprawling cities. But their constructions, though smaller, held profound significance. They built hearth-centered living spaces, arranged sleeping areas with precision, engineered ambush sites that required spatial planning, and even created mysterious ring structures deep within caves, arrangements of stalagmites broken and positioned with intentional design. These were not random acts. They were expressions of spatial intelligence passed down through generations. Modern humans often measure genius by scale, innovation, and dramatic transformation of the environment. But Neanderthals demonstrated a quieter genius, building in harmony with the land rather than against it. Their shelters were carefully integrated into natural features, maximizing warmth, minimizing wind exposure, and using available materials with astonishing efficiency. This kind of architectural intuition, patient, deliberate, respectful of nature, might still influence the way we understand space today. Think of the way many people seek comfort in enclosed, warm spaces, places where firelight, soft walls, and natural materials evoke a sense of safety. This preference may reflect ancient instincts shared with Neanderthals, who thrived in small, intimate shelters. Or consider how humans today are drawn to caves, cabins, and stone structures with simple, grounded forms. Our connection to such spaces may be more than aesthetic, it may be ancestral. Even the act of building itself, taking raw materials and shaping them into something purposeful, carries echoes of Neanderthal craftsmanship. Their toolmaking required geometry, force distribution, and detailed planning. Every flake removed from a stone tool altered its shape in a way that affected the next step, demanding an internal blueprint of the final form. This mental mapping is the foundation of engineering. In a sense, every modern architect, sculptor, or craftsman follows a lineage of ancient creators whose hands once shaped stone in firelit caves. There is something deeply human about transforming the world into a reflection of inner thought. Neanderthals expressed this through spatial organization, craftsmanship, and possibly symbolic structures. We express it through cities, art, and architecture. Yet the impulse itself, the urge to build meaning into matter, may be shared. Imagine a Neanderthal sitting beside a cave wall, arranging stones with intention. Their movements are slow, thoughtful. Each stone is tested for weight, texture, and fit. They do not rush. They sense how structure emerges from patience. This rhythm, construction as meditation, persists today in artists shaping clay, woodworkers carving beams, architects sketching forms that must eventually support weight and life. Creation becomes a dialogue with material, not domination. Our modern architecture, despite its complexity, still roots itself in ancient principles. Shelter, warmth, community, stability, these core needs have not changed since the Ice Age. We still gather around fire, now transformed into lamps, screens, and hearths. We still form circles in our social spaces, still designate areas for rest, work, and interaction. These behavioral patterns echo the spatial logic of our ancestors. In nature-focused designs, sustainable buildings, and minimalistic structures, we see a quiet return to the Neanderthal approach, building with nature instead of overpowering it. Architects today increasingly look to ancient forms for inspiration, caves, domes, earth-sheltered homes, recognizing that the instincts guiding early humans may also guide future resilience. But perhaps the deepest architectural inheritance lies in how we conceptualize space emotionally. Neanderthals understood that environment shapes well-being. Their shelters were not simply functional, they were spaces of comfort, unity, and identity. They crafted areas that encouraged togetherness around fire and protected vulnerable members during harsh weather. These priorities resonate today in the spaces we create for family, community, and belonging. Even the placement of objects in modern homes reflects ancient habits. The instinct to place important items in central, protected spaces echoes the Neanderthal hearth. The layering of soft materials for warmth, the desire for vantage points with clear visibility, the avoidance of drafts, all mirror principles used by our Ice Age kin. Our sense of home may be deeply rooted in a prehistoric understanding of space. Artists and engineers also carry echoes of Neanderthal precision. Their sensory-driven intelligence, relying on touch, sound, and manual dexterity, parallels the skills seen in sculptors, metalworkers, and craftsmen today. The deep focus required to shape stone tools resembles the concentration demanded by modern craft. These cognitive parallels suggest that some aspects of creative intelligence may have evolved long before our species existed, and survived through interbreeding and cultural exchange. Emotionally, the architect within us may also stem from Neanderthal soulfulness. Their structures were not just physical, they were expressions of community and meaning. The circles in Bruniquel Cave, arranged in darkness, speak to a desire to shape space into something symbolic or sacred. That desire, to transform a place into a meaning-filled environment, remains a hallmark of human creativity. We build monuments to our beliefs, homes that reflect our identities, and public spaces designed to evoke emotion. Neanderthals likely felt something similar, even if their expressions were simpler. If we listen carefully, we can sense their presence in the quiet corners of our minds. The part of us that finds peace in stone, comfort in firelight, and fascination in shadows on a cave wall. The part of us that seeks stability in structure and meaning in the places we shape. The part of us that understands architecture not as a profession, but as an instinct. The architects within us are not only our sapiens ancestors, they are also the Neanderthals who built slowly, carefully, and with profound connection to the land. Their legacy continues in the spaces we create, the materials we shape, and the emotional significance we attach to shelter. Their hands are long gone, but their influence lingers in ours. Their minds have fallen silent, but their architectural spirit still guides us. And every time we build something meaningful, large or small, we honor the ancient architects who carved their place in the world long before we arrived. The end did not come as a roaring catastrophe. No firestorm swept across their world, no sudden flood, no single battle or disease. Instead, extinction arrived like a slow-falling snow, silent, persistent, and indifferent. And somewhere, in one of the last refuges of their kind, a small Neanderthal band faced a night that would be remembered by none of their own people, but imagined by us as the final farewell of a species that once shaped the frozen landscapes of Europe with strength, courage, and soul. Picture a cold twilight settling over a rugged coastline or a forested valley, one of those isolated corners where the final Neanderthals clung to life. The sky glows faintly blue as snow begins to drift downward, fine and soft. The air is still. The silence feels deep, as if the land itself is holding its breath. Inside a cave warmed by a flickering fire, the last group gathers close, not knowing that their story is ending, but sensing the weight of their dwindling numbers. The hearth glows weakly, fed by the last pieces of wood gathered that day. Sparks rise in twisting spirals, reflecting in the eyes of the group. Their faces, illuminated by orange light, show the marks of hardship, scars from hunts, lines etched by cold winds, eyes that have seen too many losses. Yet there is also tenderness, the way a mother holds her child wrapped in a hide, the way two adults lean together for warmth, the way an elder rests a comforting hand on a younger shoulder. Even now, in their final hours as a people, they embody a humanity rooted in care. Outside the shelter, the world they once knew is changing in ways they cannot understand. The familiar herds have grown scarce. The winters last longer. Storms arrive with unpredictable fury. Forests that once offered cover are thinning, while landscapes shift in ways no ancient memory prepared them for. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Homo sapiens, more numerous, more adaptable, more connected, continue to spread into lands once ruled by Neanderthal feet. Inside the cave, a child stirs. She asks for food in soft sounds shaped by a language now lost forever. Her mother hushes her gently, offering a small piece of dried meat saved for the youngest. The child eats slowly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She does not know that she is among the last of her kind. She only knows the warmth of her mother's body, the smell of smoke and hide, the steady heartbeat she has listened to since birth. One of the hunters rises and moves toward the cave entrance. He stands beneath the arch of stone and looks out at the snow. His breath emerges in pale clouds. He remembers a time, not long ago, when their group was twice its current size. When hunts brought abundance. When laughter echoed loudly in the shelter. Now, only a handful remain. He does not know why the land has grown harsher or why injuries take longer to heal. But he feels the truth pressing upon him, they are fading. Not far from the entrance, bones from a previous hunt lie half buried in frost. They speak of a time when the group fought hard for survival but still had strength to share. Now, each hunt feels heavier, each failure more costly. The hunter kneels, touches the cold ground, and listens. No distant hooves, no rustling of animals, no signs of life except the whisper of snow. Their world has grown quiet. Inside, the elder begins to hum, a low, rhythmic sound that resonates with the walls. It is not a song in the way we understand it. It is more ancient, a vibration that comforts, a call to unity. The others listen. Their bodies relax. Even the fire seems to respond, its flames rising and falling in gentle waves. This hum has carried through generations. It has soothed the frightened, honored the dead, and strengthened the living. Tonight, it becomes a farewell. The child crawls closer to the elder, drawn to the familiar sound. He touches her hair gently, his eyes tired but warm. In her small face, he sees hope, hope that she might grow, might find food, might survive. But he also sees the truth. Their world has narrowed to this cave, this fire, this small circle of warmth against the vast cold beyond. Later, as night deepens, the storm intensifies. Wind howls across the entrance, carrying flakes of snow into the shelter. The fire sputters, then stabilizes. The group huddles even closer. The mother hums softly to the child, her voice merging with the elder's chant. The hunter returns and sits beside them, placing a hand on the shoulder of his companion. Their closeness is not strategic, it is emotional, instinctual. They seek comfort in one another as the darkness thickens. Hours pass. The fire burns lower. Shadows stretch along the cave walls like silent spectators of a world about to change forever. One by one, the group drifts into sleep, their bodies curled together for warmth. The elder remains awake the longest, his eyes fixed on the fire, as if memorizing its final glow. He thinks of the ancestors. He thinks of the hunts that shaped his youth. He thinks of the stories told beneath brighter flames, of the cave gatherings that once filled the air with life. He does not know the concept of extinction. He does not grasp the idea of a species ending. But he feels a profound sorrow, a sense that something irreplaceable is slipping away. He closes his eyes, breathing slowly, listening to the wind. Outside, the storm reaches its peak. Snow blankets the entrance, muffling all sound. The world becomes a white silence. In that silence, the last Neanderthals sleep, unaware that history will never record their names or their dreams. The fire dims. The final heartbeat of a lineage continues a little longer, then slows. By dawn, the storm passes. Pale light filters into the cave, illuminating still forms wrapped in furs. The fire is now only ash. The snow outside glistens untouched, as if the world has gently erased the final traces of their existence. The last night of the Neanderthals ends quietly. But their story does not. For they left more than bones in caves and tools beneath the earth. They left pieces of themselves in the genes of millions alive today. They left footprints in our understanding of what it means to be human. They left echoes, echoes in our hands, our instincts, our emotions, our relationship with the natural world. Their farewell in the snow was not the end, but a transformation. And as the sun rises over the frozen landscape where their voices once echoed, something in the wind still carries their memory, gentle, ancient, eternal. When the Neanderthals disappeared, the world did not suddenly grow quieter, yet something profound shifted beneath the surface of human existence. For the first time, Homo sapiens walked the earth alone. The valleys, caves, and hunting grounds once shared now echoed only with their voices. Some early humans may have sensed the absence without understanding it, fewer distant fires glowing at night, fewer footprints along riverbanks, fewer signs of other wandering groups. This solitude brought both opportunity and loss. With no rival humanity to challenge them, sapiens spread rapidly, filling landscapes once shaped by Neanderthal hands. But as they expanded, they inherited a silent world missing the only beings who had ever truly mirrored them. The disappearance of the Neanderthals left an unseen weight, a space in the human story where another people once stood. And in ways unspoken, sapiens carried that emptiness forward into history.